Okay,
That's fine.
that's good. That's good. Any crack? How's all?
Good. Everything's good. How you doing?
Oh, not too bad, man. Not too bad. Still working away on the old album that never seems to end, but getting
How long
there.
you been working on it?
I don't even want to know, like 10 years.
Oh, wow. So is it the I have a question for you. So for
Go on.
everyone watching,
Go on.
this is Paul Melia, did I pronounce that correctly?
Perfect, man. Perfect.
And he had me on maybe about a month or so ago onto his podcast, Hold On to the Colors. And so that's this is the continuation of that conversation. But my question was that name. Uh what does that name mean? Where did that come from? Because I saw that you also had an album of some sorts at one point named that, but when I tried to listen to the album on YouTube, it said the videos were deleted. So I
Oh,
was like all confused.
oh, the name of the which Hold On to the Colors.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like from so the album Hold On to the Colors was is my first album, which was 2013. Geez, that's a long time ago. But that was like so it's to do with synesthesia. So I have it's to do with colors. So I would do stuff based on colors and like I would assign different when I'd be doing like my tracks. It's like the trumpets might sound yellow and this sounds yellow. So like it was kind of based
Yeah.
around that. Like it's not a concept album, but just was something I had called synesthesia. So I was like, that's kind of cool. Hold on to colors, and I wrote a song called Hold On to Colors, and I was like, okay, that sounds kind of good. So it was quite funny when I was doing the strings. There was one song called "Where's the Friends," and I said to the orchestra, I'd written on the top, "Make it sound red," and they're like, okay, or sound more red, or some shit like that.
I
I'd
feel like
written down.
that I feel like that means something, like
Yeah,
almost not angry, but with energy. That, at least
yeah.
that's what I get from Red.
Yeah, well, I think I kind of meant it in more of like a romantic kind of way, like a rose or something like that. That was my kind of
Okay.
thought process of it. But
Yeah.
I always think to do with music and colors. I think a lot of people relate to that because if you say to someone, you know, I'm feeling blue, they always associate it with feeling down. They never go, oh, I'm feeling
Yeah.
blue, and someone says you feel oh happy. You know what I mean? And but there's certain type of music for me that would be just super colorful. Like that's why I love all that psychedelic Beatles stuff because it's totally like synesthesia type music. It's just like everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I that is completely different than what I interpreted from the name Hold On to Your Color, because I really like that. I really like that
Oh,
phrase.
okay.
And I this is going to make no sense, but the feeling I got from it was like
Yeah.
it holding on to what you love going into the future, like not letting go of maybe not growing up to some extent, like hold on to the colors, like hold on to your youth, hold on to your joy, whatever your experience at the moment. Like that's what I thought you were going for. I'm
That
completely wrong.
that's cool. I mean, it makes sense because I have never grown up, so maybe you're right on that one. Like, I mean, I'm edging closer to 40, and I still haven't grown up, which I don't know. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I think it's
No, I
good
think that's a good thing.
it's good in a way. Like it's good to hold on to that kind of childish part of yourself with regards to kind of creative stuff. I think because when you're a kid, dude, you're kind of with creative stuff, you're super focused. Like, you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
just, like when you were younger, what kind of stuff were you focused on? Were you always focused on music, or was there any other like passions you had?
No, I mean music not to the extent like I've only been recording for maybe about 3 or 4 years. But before that, I
Yeah.
was into music, but I wouldn't say like I dedicated time to it. I would just listen to a lot of music and really enjoyed it.
Mm.
I've had, which I think we talked about this last time. Like many of my interests involved working with my hands and fixing stuff. And my dad was a mechanic, so we were always working on cars. He was into cars, so like I always liked spending time on that. I've restored a few cars with my dad, so like
That's cool.
that's years of dedication there. So I guess that's my answer. I guess cars is what I spent most of my time on growing up, like big
Ah,
projects. I mean,
that's interesting. Because when I've always kind of I used to like toys. I collected toys when I was a kid, but I was super meticulous about it. When people come around, and I'd be like, "Oh, you're playing with my toys wrong." I had like I had it sounds crazy, but I had like storylines set up. Like I had these like I
Yeah.
would play with my toys, and the next day I would continue like this storyline. And because I had like toys from He-Man and Spider-Man and shit like that, I was connecting all these universes in this weird kind of way as a kid would do. And each day I would go back and I'd be like, I had this one toy who was like this lizard dude. Like it was a cheap ass toy. And I somehow made him into some sort of emperor of some sort of universe thing. And I'm going on a roundabout here, but my point is, I always was into things that I could kind of escape through. So when I got older and I couldn't really play with my toys when I was 15, I was just a lunatic. But I mean, that kind of went over to the music side of things, and so I had comics, and then I had toys and stuff. So I'm always trying to escape through something, and I think music was just a good way for me to escape because it's like there's a kind of safeness in it. Like I don't know, do you feel that same way? There's a kind of safe, like there's a safeness when you're in your studio just doing your own little things. You're kind of in your own
I
world.
actually, I would say the opposite.
Really?
Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah, I feel very vulnerable, and I feel like a lot of the times it's for the completely wrong reason. It's because
Okay.
I'm worrying about something a piece of equipment that's like not working right. I'm always stressing out about something happening in the studio, and that
Okay.
often takes too much space in my head when I'm trying to do a take. I don't know. I feel like I'm still learning so much that I'm not comfortable yet. Like
Right.
I have go to drum mic setups, go to microphone for guitar. Like I know it's gonna work. Like in that sense, I'm comfortable, but in my headspace, I'm not always comfortable. I'm always anxious for the next step.
But is that recording or is that writing?
I think my answer has changed over the past couple of months because when I was writing before I released my album, I was having so much fun with it. I was having all these creative ideas. And now I'm trying to work on a second piece, a second album, an EP or something. I'm not sure yet. And I am second guessing everything. I
Wow.
probably have written hundreds of riffs in the past couple months, but I can't stick on something because now that like I have a little bit of fans that want to listen to my music, I feel this pressure and I can't stick with anything because I'm like, this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. And now I'm just like second guessing myself.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's where my headspace has been.
so you kind of expectations have kind of got the best of you kind of type thing. I always say like it's like someone asked David Bowie like why does he write I think it was like I'm probably paraphrasing but like why do you write music or who do you write music for, and he goes I write music for myself. And the only
Yeah.
one if you can't if you don't like it, I always think that no one else is going to really like it because you have to be authentic with it, and then people can kind of feel it. You know what I mean? And just
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
it's because you want people to like your music, but then at the same time you kind of you want to be true to what you're doing and not write music you think other people would like. So there's a kind of balance there. I always find
Yeah.
there's which is can be difficult to find because sometimes people who are critical of your music could have a good point. You can get lost in it a bit and kind of think, especially if you're doing everything yourself, like you can just get a bit lost in it, I find. You know.
Oh, definitely. I remember when I first met this guy. I was buying something off Craigslist. I bought some cymbals from him, and we were talking about home recording. And he's been home recording for 20 years. And something he said to me was that it could become so self-masturbatory at a certain point when you're just the only one working on something. It's like you need to start working with other people just to get that breakup.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think even if it's like just even if it's just someone's opinion on things, someone that is, I always find getting an opinion from someone who doesn't actually make music is quite cool because they see it in a different
Yeah.
way. If you're showing it to someone who makes music, and records music, they kind of there's a certain way people might look at things, and.
Well, I feel like if you were to send me a song and say, or I have people actually a lot email me songs and ask me for advice,
Really, yeah.
and yeah, and I'm always happy to do it. It literally takes 3 minutes most of the time to listen to someone's song.
Yeah.
And honestly, I get a lot of great songs, very good songs. But what I was gonna say was like when someone asked me that, okay, I'm listening to it. I think, all right, the drums sound good? What about the guitar? Is it too overpowering? Does it mix with the bass? I'm thinking about all these intricate little things to think about. And like you're saying, if someone doesn't record music or care about music that much, they just want to care if it sounds good. If it makes their head go back and forth.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and that's kind of the right way to be because you can get too lost on the production and stuff like that. Like we were saying the last podcast when we did, you know, I was talking about like fucking listening to hours for a snare sound. And you just like you just listen to a snare for ages and go, oh, that fucking snare's not right, and everyone's like, oh, that sounds fine. You're like, yeah, but listen to that snare, like. You can only hear the snare, and they're like, "Yeah, but it's a good song." Yeah, but the snare, it's just
yeah, you don't hear that. You don't hear that ringing at the
yeah,
end.
yeah.
You're like, what?
Or you want like a specific, like that from the record I've been working on for ages now. Like I'm so specific on the snare sound I want for each song. It's stupid, like because it doesn't matter.
I,
But
I'm,
you
I'm
just
like
get
the
stuck in it.
exact opposite.
Really.
I
In what way?
Specifically to the snare. I every time I tune my snare, I just tune it by random, and I don't go for like, oh, I know 2 turns is pretty much where I want it to be. I've never done that. I've always just done it. That sounds. I like that, and I mean, I'm sure if you go back and listen to my songs, the snare sounds are probably really different for that reason. Honestly, I feel like that's not possible with some snare drums, but my Ludwig Acrolite that I have, I mean, honestly, you could put the oldest heads and barely do any tuning, and it's gonna sound good.
Right,
You know?
right. That's a cool way to be though, man. I sometimes wish I could be more like just go, that's it. Not be so, I don't know, anal about it. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like the song is the main thing. There's some songs that you listen to, you go, that's a great song. And then you actually listen to the production and you go, well, that's an odd kind of snare.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't. Like look at some of the early Beatles songs. The production on them aren't amazing, but they're amazing songs. Like the song carries
100%.
everything through than the production, and I think that's a big flaw with me. I get too lost in production sometimes. I get too lost in because I have the songs done, or so they're done so long that I only have I'm only focusing on the production then because all the melodies are done, all the songs are recorded. Then
Ye-
I think if I did it faster, it wouldn't be as much of an issue, I think.
I think it is hard to tell sometimes when it's an issue with the recording method you're using or microphone or something along those lines versus sometimes the songwriting. There's one element that is slightly off, and at least for me, and it's so hard to pinpoint where it is sometimes. You're like, is the guitar too much? And it has nothing to do with how it was recorded. It was just, at least personally, and I think a lot of people tend to do this, is we try to jam pack everything into our song, every instrument possible. There's no room to breathe.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just like, man, something doesn't sound right. And it's probably just because there's too much going on.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I put my first album out, I got some great reviews, and then I got some bad ones. And it's you could get 100 great reviews, and it's that one bad one. You're like, that motherfucker. And one guy said, what's he said? He said there was too many notes, and I was like, too many notes or something like that. I was like, okay, that was weird. And then there was another one that was just a scathing review, and I was like so angry. But in hindsight, it was good, because it made me angry, and then I thought, well, it doesn't really matter. Like You know, if you believe the good reviews, you got to believe the bad reviews. And it
Yeah.
doesn't, you know, it doesn't kind of matter. Like, I mean, if you get it, I mean, it matters in a way that, like, if you get a good review, people will go, oh, that's kind of, they might pay more attention to it. But I think it mattered more in the 60s and 70s, like that, and maybe 80s too, and 90s. It carried more weight then than a review does now. Like, it could make or break an album back then, especially the 60s. Whereas now people are like, they don't care, which is good, you
Yeah, I
know.
would agree with that.
You know, you like
I
look at
was
Pet Sounds. Pet Sounds got shit reviews when it came out first. Like,
I mean, this sorry, go ahead.
no, that's all I was saying. Yeah,
I was gonna say this is true for a lot of media, books, movies, music, albums. Sometimes in retrospect, we look back and go, "Wow, that movie was incredible." But at the time, it didn't get good. It wasn't commercially successful. Uh, I think I think the current landscape is a little different. I don't know. I agree with what you were saying though.
probably because there's just so much stuff, dude. Like, there's so much stuff, and I think because of the internet, you can kind of, we're talking about living in your, you can kind of live in your own little world, and it doesn't really, it just doesn't. Music, I don't think, which unfortunately sucks, doesn't have the same weight as it did years ago. Like, on the level of, we'll say, I know I'm going back to the Beatles, but I mean, when the Beatles released a record, it was a huge, it was like an event. And you could say
Yeah.
when Taylor Swift releases an album, it's big, but it's not on the scale like a Beatles record. You know, it's not like there's going to be queues lining up down the street. Now, you could say that's because people could only buy records back then; they couldn't stream it. But it just didn't have that weight to it, because anyone can go on now and just stream a song, whereas you actually had to pay money to get it. So you kind
Yeah.
of, you listen to it more because you didn't have
I
money to
think
buy loads of records.
I think there was also a much different social
Yeah.
atmosphere where, like, let's just go to the time where people were just listening to records in their house. You know, you of course obviously didn't have every single album. You had friends that you knew. Oh, he had Led Zeppelin 3. He used to have all the Crosby, Stills, and Nash albums. You know, and there was definitely that social aspect where you'd go to people's houses, listen to music, hang out. And now, I don't know. It seems to be more of, oh, put on a playlist while we're at a barbecue, and the music will play in the background as like a ambiance. You
Yeah.
know, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe that's how it was back then. Obviously, I wasn't alive, so I'm just assuming. But I think there was definitely a little more of a social connection there with listening
Yeah.
to music.
Plus, back then there was less things to do, like, so you kind of would, you couldn't just go and waste hours on the internet like I've done many times and many other people have. If you got a record, that was kind of something, like, it was like a big thing to get, because obviously people couldn't afford loads of records, and you know it was like a form of escapism and everything. So people would just, I just think people were more invested in it, obviously because of loads of factors, like, but I just think, because there was less options, and I think when we have less options, we're probably happier, I think, personally, because more options just makes us have, I think it can make us have, it makes us make less decisions. Like, if you had 4 tracks, you have to use those 4 tracks. Whereas with Pro Tools or with anything, you have endless tracks, so you have you
Yeah.
have endless choice. So which can not be a good thing. I mean, I've gone through that many times, just the endless choice, and I can't make a choice, and then you just, and so at
Mm-hmm.
every level, music has changed with. Like listen to some of those records that were recorded on 4 track. They're incredible, like, or even Sinatra. Sinatra did like one take. Like, most of those takes
Yeah.
he sung were like one
I,
take. Incredible.
the majority of music I've been listening to, and for quite some time, a few months, maybe like 6 months, a lot of the music is either recorded all live in the room or live in the room with vocal overdubs. I've like I think I explained last time. I've been getting like really into 50s, early 60s artists of all genres. And I mean, majority of those songs are recorded right there in the live room with maybe vocal overdubs depending on the situation. And I mean, those songs are fantastic, so it's I try not to be too judgmental, but it's like the way music is created is a lot different. Once again, there's less of that social feeling of a band, a whole blues band in a room together. It's different to every single degree. It's with recording studios came isolation booths, and kind of with isolation booths came with like isolated metaphorical
Yeah.
as well. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm making sense here, but like,
Yeah, I get it.
everything is so isolated.
Yeah, for sure. I like, and if you listen to like even at every level of, we'll say, 60 stuff, you could have the Wrecking Crew, which played on Brian Wilson stuff, and you could even have like Motown stuff. Just like some of those records sound incredible, and there's like some of them were in such close proximity of each other, so you're hearing bleed going into things and stuff like that. And I think that's just what makes those records great. And like they were like cranking the console up to get distortion and stuff like that. Just all these kind of cool little things that added to the sound of those records. And
Yeah, we were saying this earlier in the podcast where at the end of the day, it's really about the songwriting. It's not, I mean, not all the time, but there's situations where the songwriting overcomes the lack of recording fidelity. And especially in the 1950s with lower budget acts that were in, lower budget studios, sometimes home studios. I mean, if you actually listen to the instruments, it sounds like crap, but it's still great. Like it's such a weird thing. Like if you were to play one of those instruments alone, you'd be like, oh my God, that drum track sounds like mashed potatoes, man. It's all over the place. But with everything combined onto one mono track, it just sounds great,
yeah, it was even like I was listening the other day to McCartney's first record, the McCartney record, and some of that he recorded on a home reel-to-reel. And
yeah,
so I think he was recording on one mic. So sometimes the singing. I know he went and overdid other things, or re-recorded other things. Sorry, but man, there's just something cool about that. I mean, he could have recorded some of those songs perfectly, but they just wouldn't have been as good. He captured the vibe, and I think Mark Hollis said it before. He said, "You're always trying to, what was it? Nothing's ever as good as your demo." There's something about a demo that captures something that can be very hard to capture otherwise within just
oh boy, we're freezing
redoing
here.
it. It's all right, man. We can edit. That's the joy of not being live. And we're back.
I can see you now. I all right. Internet connection's unstable. Why does this happen again? Man, I think I need a new laptop. This laptop is just...
How old is that laptop?
I think we're back, though. I think we're good. This laptop must be... let me think. 2014. It's 9 years old.
Oh, shit, bro. You definitely need a new laptop.
Yeah. You should see the contraption I have keeping this together. The two parts completely separated, so I built this wooden contraption that like holds it. Oh my God, my family keeps telling me I need to buy a new one. I'm like, no. It's so expensive for a computer. I just bought a desktop computer and it was, I think, $1,500 to help me edit videos. It's so expensive.
Yeah, but if you get a good one, they'll last a long
Crazy.
time. They'll last a long time. So, yeah. What were we on about?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, McCartney.
I was about to respond with we were talking about the demo, the demoitis, and I think at that stage your songwriting and your recording kind of work off of one another, and you might change something be what am I trying to say? Like specifically with this McCartney situation, you were saying he just had the one microphone in his house, and that definitely forced him to record things in certain ways, and I'm sure that affected his songwriting to a minor degree for that song.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of the magic comes from, that back and forth there, and a lot of the times your demo is stuck in that sweet spot of going back and forth.
Yeah, like even on the first track in that album, Lovely Linda, she comes in the door when he's recording it. So you kind of hear her coming in the door. And even on this, the follow-up to that, Ram, which Ram's a great record. Have you heard Ram by Paul McCartney?
Oh, that's one of my favorites. Yeah,
brilliant
one of my
record.
favorites.
You know that part on Uncle Albert, when there's a part where the telephone, where he's kind of doing that telephone voice.
Yeah.
But the engineer was supposed to they didn't have automation, but kind of punch in for the telephone effect. But he kind of I think he did it too soon, so you can kind of hear McCartney doing the kind of sound of a telephone thing, and McCartney knew, and he said, just leave it in, because it kind of added something to it. And those little mistakes are kind of cool. You don't get them really when you're doing them by yourself, because you can just easily just chop it out or something like that. Whereas like there was always mistakes like that, which is cool.
For the last video I put out, it was a vocal effect video.
Yeah, I like that one. That was
and that was really my first time listening to some of my vocals isolated.
Right.
And I didn't realize how much extra noises were going on this track. There was a lot of parts where snippets from a previously recorded instrument on that track were still there, and I just missed it. I didn't erase it, and it was a lot. And then I started to look at other songs, and I'm like, oh my god, like I really need to pay attention to my vocal tracks, because my vocal tracks are usually the last thing I do, and I'm usually recording over a previously recorded track.
Okay.
And oh my god, but it's never affected my songs that I've noticed, so I think it's so interesting.
Yeah. It's only kind of when you kind of go down into it like more deeply, you kind of see these things. Because like, if you took apart loads of songs, you probably find that there's loads of mistakes on songs, especially classic songs, like just things you'd never heard because you don't have the stems for them. But if you stem them apart, you'd hear stuff, and probably little timing things as well.
This is really relevant. I am currently, I've been working on this idea for a video where anytime I'm listening to a song that has some sort of editing mistake, or you could hear a cut in the tape, or there's a dropout, or a musician makes a mistake, or they come in early, like all mistakes that were left into songs. And I currently have maybe 25 songs on my list, and I add at least 2 every week. I'm listening to new music, or even the same music I've been listening to my whole life. I'm just actively looking for certain things like that, and I don't know when I should stop, but I have a pretty sizable list of just like I said, mistakes that's in song making, and I don't know if YouTube will let me put up snippets of these songs, 30 of them back to back, but I think it'll be an interesting idea.
You could do it. I know Spotify you can do it on, because all you do is you can actually, when you put something on Spotify, you can insert a song into their podcast for.
Okay.
It used to be called Anchor, but whatever. But whatever it's called now. I think Spotify for podcast. But I know you can, because all it does is it takes the song from actual Spotify, so they're still getting monetization from it, which is kind of cool, as opposed to
you could just use a snippet of the song when you do that.
Yeah. So say you do
cool.
say you do a podcast. I don't know if it's the same, but when I upload my podcast on that, you can kind of insert songs in between. There's a slight little edit place where you can do it, so you can kind of put an edit there, and kind of, as long as you know where you're doing it, you can play it and listen to it, which is kind of cool. Actually, Good Vibrations has a fairly known splice.
Yes, that's one of the examples I use, and I try not to use a lot of the well-known examples, because I'd say that's a pretty well-known one. There's some other ones, the Led Zeppelin Is it Black Dog when you sing it, or is it Heartbreaker when you sing it in the back? Robert Plant's, separate alternate vocal take is playing. I hope you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's on the second album, but that's a well-known one. So I'm trying not to do those ones, but I am doing the Beach Boys one. Another like classic one is Louie Louie with one, the drummer screaming the F word during the recording, and two, the vocalist comes in a verse early. Like that those are just like the classic ones I can think of.
Is there anyone that is really not known that you found?
Wait, say that again. I'm sorry.
Is there anyone that's really that's a not known one that you found that might be from a well-known artist?
I from a well-known artist, maybe not. Maybe not.
That's difficult, I'd say.
But if you listen to a lot of mainstream artists, like I've been saying, the past 6 months or so, I've been listening to a lot of 50s and early 60s. All of that stuff, all of that pop stuff where it's going on a radio, to be played on a radio, there's edits everywhere. It's very common. So I don't think it's very hard at all to find a popular song that, isn't known to say.
Yeah, because it was some of those guys back then were just masters at splicing tape, like that they could do it just without there was some edit in one song that was just so well done. I definitely couldn't hear it, but yeah, some of them are really well done though. Some of them you can't hear it at all.
Yeah, I think there's a lot you would never notice. You would never know, even if someone told you. That's how clean it is. And honestly, it's not to get something that, unless you're looking for it, you won't hear. It is really easy. Splicing tape is a lot easier than it may seem if you've never done it before. And as long as your machine is set up to do that task. Specifically, like my 16 track, when you put it in edit mode, you could rock the tape back and forth across the head, and you could hear, the sound as it goes past the head. Whereas my two-track machine back there, there's no edit button, so you can't do that. Like, the machine doesn't let you drag the tape across.
Right.
So it's not an easy way to do it. So you have to get a little creative. There's a way I've gotten around it that I'm not going to explain on the video right now. It's hard to explain. There's a way I've gotten around it, but basically what I'm saying is it's really not like, I don't know, to someone who hasn't, I believe you haven't recorded on tape before, like, does that seem like hard to do?
It probably does, it seems a bit, I've read so much about it, I'd give it a go and completely mess it up. I'd be like, oh, I think I know, and then I'd be just like, oh no, what have I done? So it'd be super daunting, especially if you've got a track that you really love and you're like, oh my god, I can't screw this up,
Don't get me wrong, it is extremely nerve-wracking, daunting when you're first doing it. I mean, I still have that feeling every single time I make an important splice. I'm like, oh god. But I rarely will ever screw up on one of those important splices that I'm really paying attention to and making sure I'm not cutting any corners. It's really not that difficult.
Yeah, so you've got to the point where you kind of know exactly what you're comfortable with what you're doing.
I second guess myself, but like I said, it's always worked out well. So we were talking about vocals earlier. How often do you spend recording singing? Do you spend like a lot of time or? A lot.
Really?
Definitely more than, I would say my drums and my vocals, which is the first step and then the last step, take the longest recording. Drums, just because, one, I'm a drummer and I know I could do better a lot of the times. And two, because the drums carry an enormous amount of energy to the song. And actually, three, I need to make sure the timing is good, because that's where I'm basing all my timing off of.
Oh, I get you.
So that's why, even though I could get a drum take, a good drum take easy, I want a excellent drum take. So that's why that takes a lot of time. And then my vocals, which is the last step, takes a really long time, because I'm honestly just never happy with my vocals. It's my weakest point by far when it comes to instrumentation. I don't know if you could call that instrumentation, but as far as tracking stuff, and I have so much to learn with my voice. I don't have any control at all. So because of that, I often rely on a lot of takes instead of a good performance.
Right, right. Yeah, but it's kind of like it's like drums are really like the backbone of, especially if it's a song, like a song with that drums are a focal point in it. It's like you need a good rhythm because it carries the track, and then the singing is kind of the message to the listener in a way, especially what you're trying to get across, especially with the words. So they really are two important things in any song. I always find, especially
Yeah.
nowadays, because drums are really more upfront than they were years ago. In the 60s and stuff, they could be a bit
Oh,
more backwards, and they didn't. You couldn't hear a lot of kicks, we'll say, on old recordings. You could hear them, but they weren't as
yeah.
prominent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to a lot of the I'd say like earlier American blues records and early rock and roll as well, the drums are so low. It's really just there to keep people in time almost sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. But even like I was listening to, like I was saying, to this to McCartney. I put on Band on the Run, that Wings song, and you kind of notice how no, it doesn't sound like, I mean, if that was done now, it would sound like huge, but it's actually quite tame. The song's still great, but it's quite tame. I mean, it was surprising because I've heard it many times, but I was just kind of listening. I was like, it's kind of actually quite tame. The drums aren't like massive and stuff like that. Whereas
I,
if it was done now, it'd be
and
huge.
that's why I think sometimes the more sparse you are, the better. I was touching on this before, where when you're kind of just jam packing and adding notes just to add notes, it can take away the impact of something. Where, like you're saying, the Band on the Run, I mean, it's not,
Yeah,
it's very, just classic rock and roll beat, but it's clean. There's not a lot going on, and it hits right. It hits you right because
yeah,
it fits with the song.
yeah. It's funny, like, just how much the drums has become such a huge part, like a bigger part. You went, like we said, obviously you went to the 60s, and then the 70s, and then the 80s, which is kind of that more electronic drums, which is probably my least of favorite kind of.
Agreed.
I like
I
I like electronic music, but I hate when you're trying to replicate an actual drummer with an electronic drum case. It's like, no, there's no feel in it for me.
I thought you were referring to, like, I was referring to the gated reverb
Oh, I hate
on the
that.
snare.
That's
Like,
shit, man.
I there's very few times where I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. Most of the time where it's like classic 80s, the gated reverb, I'm like, no, the song would be so much better if you didn't do that.
Yeah, some of like the 80s stuff, and you're like, man, if that had 70s production, because it's cool. Like, the songs are cool, but I think the 80s was just that era of like super, a super production kind of, like, and just kind of some of it just took the essence out of the songs. I mean, I know I said to you on the last podcast a band called Talk Talk, which for me was like probably the highlight of the 80s music for me, and I wouldn't even call it 80s music. They were doing something that, they started off like an 80s band, Duran Duran, and then end up doing fucking jazz music and like ambient and stuff like that. So it's like you listen to something like that came out in 88, and it's completely the opposite to what everyone is doing of that. Like, I'm sure there was some people doing
Yeah.
some, but bands like that, like Talk Talk, and I know Tears for Fears did, used a lot of kind of 80s stuff, but I thought the songwriting was so great. You can kind of, you know, ignore that. And Aha are
hmm
another band who did stuff like that. And I don't know if you ever heard the Blue Nile. They were like a really fucking good 80s band.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, they had some
Maybe if I heard a song.
quality songs. Or Prefab Sprout, or another brilliant 80s band. But I think when we think of the 80s, especially production, the first thing that comes to mind is that massive, like, gated snare. Like, that's the first production thing, like, just like Phil Collins kind of huge.
That is the instantly 80s button for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, and then the kind of 90s went back to more kind of acoustic-ish production, if you know what I mean, like especially with
yeah,
grunge.
Are you familiar with like Steve Albini?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did the Nirvana stuff.
So Steve
The Neutral.
Albini, like I feel like he is a kind of a great like figurehead. No, what's the word I'm looking for here? He's kind of like that image of the '90s drum sound, or just '90s record sound to me.
Yeah, he was a spearhead of that, wasn't he?
Yeah, and his approach was less manipulation. We want to go back to natural room sound, and I know that's especially true for his drum sound. I've watched a video about him talking about his drum recording sound, like his setup, and it's very natural sounds, like exactly what you would hear in the room. And I got to be honest with you, I don't like it.
Really?
I'm not really a fan. Yeah.
Wow.
And I hate to say it because I know people are going to be mad at me because people like really respect Steve Albini, and I do too. It's not like I think he's an idiot or something. I prefer lesser mic'd drum sounds.
Do you prefer like less kind of room sounds in a drum kit? Do you prefer like I
no,
like
no,
Go on, sorry.
I would. I don't say that. I think. I guess I'm just like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just a '60s drum sound fanboy, where I'm like, one ribbon microphone in front of the drums, and that's all you need, and you get the drum sound and the room sound.
Okay.
Like that's the sound I really like. It definitely doesn't sound true to the room, but for some reason I love that drum sound.
Okay, so but are you talking about, like the Glyn's Johns kind of drum sound?
No, more
the 3 mic setup.
Yeah, so he had like the 3/4 mic setup where I think the 3 was just the 2, the one above the kit, the one by the floor tom, equidistant, and then I think the 3rd was a bass drum. And then the 4th was sometimes he would put the snare mic in the microphone, or microphone on the snare. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I've actually never tried that in this room because it's too small to do that. But I was referring to more of, think debut Beatles album, one room microphone for the drums. I like that sound.
Okay. Right. So you don't really like too much close mic stuff?
It's not like I only like that thing. That's just like my favorite. If whatever the song calls for, I will happily do. Or if I'm recording someone and they ask me, sure, whatever you want. But when I'm listening, and it's not even necessarily for my own recordings, it's just when I'm listening to a song, the first thing I listen to is the drum sound, and that's just one that I love. I love it.
Yeah. Is your favorite Beatles era the first few records?
I keep spilling tea all over myself. I go back and forth a lot. Right now, I would say yes. Right now, with the other type of music I've been listening to a lot, it's very much related to that. I mean, they were playing the people that I'd been listening to in those records, like that. They were going for that type of sound. So I think maybe that's why I'm kind of stuck in that Beatles era recently.
Okay. I think I'm definitely the whole, for me, the drums, my favorite drum sound of the Beatles was 2. Strawberry Fields, I love that drum sound, and Tomorrow Never Knows. That just fucking... I remember the first time I heard Tomorrow Never Knows, I was like, is that a remix or something? Because it was so, it still sounds modern.
That's a game changer right there.
Yeah.
I mean, we could say this about a lot of things with the Beatles, obviously, but Tomorrow Never Knows, I mean, that song obviously was a huge influence on a lot of people, I mean,
Yeah, it's such a... Just everything about it, even the way they did with the tape, running the tape loops and I just think it sounds so modern. It just sounds... Even today, every time I listen to it, it doesn't sound dated. Because, obviously some Beatles stuff does sound dated. which is natural. It's from the fucking 60s. But I mean, that one song in particular just doesn't. No, however they captured it, it just does not sound dated. And the funny thing is, the demo version of it, like normally like a song, no matter if a song is good, it can be kind of done in any manner. You know what I mean? You could play it acoustically, you could play it this. It's the song that matters. But that song, the production adds so much to the song, because the demo version of it is like really different. It's like it's got that drum beat, but it's kind of. I don't get it.
It's been a while since I listened to the demo. That's definitely. I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna listen.
Yeah,
to
it's got a. There's still a beat on it, but it just does not have that same vibe. I don't know what it is, but they lucked out on that one for sure, because it just came out perfectly.
Yeah, that drum sound. I mean, the drum beat and the drum sound. This actually reminds me of a funny anecdote I was thinking about bringing up, because I knew we were going to bring up the Beatles to some degree.
Who are they?
And we always talk, not always, but the past few times we've talked, when we say people don't like the Beatles, we're like, what? Come on,
Yeah, liars.
And I have a funny little story. This happened years ago. I was a much younger lad, and I forget where I was, but there was this girl that I was interested in, and we were flirting or whatever. I forget what the situation was, but it was a group kind of situation, and someone brought up the Beatles, and she was like, why do people care so much about the Beatles? Like, they're not that important.
Blasphemy.
And like instantly, I was like, I have no more attraction to this girl. Who is this girl? But I was thinking about it recently. I'm like, when she said that, and like I got like really annoyed with it, it wasn't because she didn't like the Beatles. Yeah. It was more just like, that is such an ignorant statement. You clearly have no idea what you're talking about if you think that's the case. That they've changed music in a multitude of ways. It's more than whether or not you like them, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I always thought that was funny.
Yeah, like it's same. I think I don't know. I probably said it on. I think I did some sort of podcast on the Beatles before, but my brother says to me, "Oh, I don't like the Beatles," and I'm like, "How the fuck do you not like?" Come on, like I don't believe him. Actually, he just said it to me, and I don't believe him. I'm like, no, man, no, I just don't believe you. Like,
there are a few people when they say that where I'm like, I feel like you're just trying to be contrarian. Yeah. But I do know a few people in specific that really don't like the Beatles. The kid, I used to be in a band called the Growling Hounds, and the kid Mike, the guitarist, I love the kid, but he didn't like two bands that really always hurt me. He didn't like the Beatles, and he didn't like the Who, and he was a gigantic Rolling Stones fan.
Oh,
and,
come on! See, I don't like the Stones. I don't like the Stones, so maybe I'm one of those guys.
It's not that I don't like the Stones. I definitely like them a lot less than a lot of the other dad rock bands.
Yeah.
But
Painted Black, great song.
But, yeah, I mean, they have obviously amazing songs, amazing albums. I like them. But like, we would always do Rolling Stone covers and never any Beatles or Who covers.
Oh, no.
Who covers especially because, Keith Moon is the reason why I play drums. So any excuse to play a Who song is like, let's go, let's do it. And not once did we ever play a Who song, and it was just always so upsetting to me.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that people would say they don't like the Beatles. I mean, I suppose like there's just, I don't know. I can't get it, actually. I can't get it, because they're just, you could say I don't like some songs, but I guarantee you'd find one song that someone would like. There's just, because they did so many, they covered so much breadth within their music. I mean, it's not like they were doing hardcore jazz or avant-garde stuff, but like, but even if you want to say that
it's pop. I mean, it's
yeah.
pop. It's supposed to be easy listening for the most part. I mean, some of their songs obviously aren't easy listening, but it's pop. It's supposed to be listened to by the masses, so I don't know. You're always going to get haters of any pop band.
Yeah. Plus, what's cool about the Beatles is, like, you had McCartney and Lennon were such different writers. You know what I mean? You can kind of always tell a McCartney song and a Lennon song because lyrically they were very different, and melodically they were very different too. You know, like Paul, we could say was probably more. I'd say Paul was probably more gifted at music, like from a music perspective and just a melodic perspective. Than as much as I love Lennon, but just you know what I mean. Paul could kind of do vaudevillian type songs like Honey Pie, and he could also do Helter Skelter, and he could also do, you know what I mean? Whereas John could do loads too, but you know, I think just Paul from a
I totally agree with that. And it's like Paul was definitely a little more talented when it came to that aspect, but that I can't necessarily say that one was a better musician than the other, because like John was almost more than his music, I feel, where I feel like he had more to his persona, more to his political aims, where Paul McCartney, he had some of those, but his songs almost were kind of free from that. Like, to me, I always felt Paul McCartney songs were like a whole journey onto somewhere, where John Lennon songs were his feelings coming out almost a little more. And I feel like because of that, it's a little different subject matter.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just a personal thing that I've seen or...
Oh, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. But that's what kind of makes the Beatles great. You have these two guys who have different, probably, ideologies on certain things. And, you know, John was way more acerbic than Paul. You know what I mean? He, you know... And... The irony is, like, one of the best solo Beatles records is from George Harrison, like All Things Must Pass. Like, that is just fucking brilliant.
I say Ram is better than All Things Must Pass.
Really?
That might upset some people. I think, once again, this is going to upset a lot of people here. All Things Must Pass, if that was condensed to one disc... I think it would be a better album. I think there is some fat to be trimmed there.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah, it shouldn't have been a double album. It should have been a single album. You know,
only because it was his first album. I feel like he would have... This is me totally talking out of my ass right now. I feel like he would have had more commercial success if he came out with something that was easily digestible. Where the double album is fantastic. Every song, if you're a fan of George Harrison, is amazing. But from like a commercial appeal, it's kind of a lot to take in.
Yeah, but I think people back then were more kind of like open to that, I think. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at it, like, if you look at it, McCartney went to number one with Uncle Albert. Like, that went to number one. Like, that would never in a million years get to number fucking 1,000 nowadays. You know, so people were kind of... Certain songs that... Now, you could say maybe that's because he's McCartney as well as pushing it. But still, the fact that a song like that got to number one in 1971 is crazy. Like, you would never... That would never happen nowadays. You know, people seem to be more open to stuff like that than they were, like Bohemian Rhapsody, for example. Someone bought out a song like Bohemian Rhapsody nowadays. First off, it'd never get played on radio because they tell them it's too long, and even then they were probably saying that. So there was, I think there was a certain amount back then that people were more open-minded to longer form things like double albums and stuff like that. Because the 70s was the fucking decade of the double album.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Like I said, I'm totally pulling this out of my ass. I've just, as we talked before, Ram is one of my favorite albums. That's the only reason I said that comment. It wasn't, my opinion's not well thought out at all. It's just Ram to me is...
I love Ram too.
It's kind of what I was saying about the difference between Paul McCartney and John Lennon. That song is just like so much joy. There's so much like, this is a wild ride, man. We're in an amusement park. We're going there. We're going there. We're going there. I don't know. That's just how I feel.
That song, "The Backseat of My Car," is such a quality song. Very, very Brian Wilson-esque. You know, I'm actually reading a book on McCartney at the moment. So it's like McCartney years from like 69 to 74, 75. It's this huge book. It's like 800 pages. So it goes into detail about Like, so it's literally goes from the breakup, and then it's going into detail about him recording McCartney and then recording Ram and all the stuff, and it's like really meticulous of going into the details. It's very, very interesting. I highly recommend that book if you're a McCartney fan. So I'm actually at the Ram part. So I've been listening to Ram as I'm
Yeah.
reading the book. So it's cool, like listening to the parts where they're describing certain things. You're like, oh, that's cool. No, that's good. That's good. Yeah. So that's always kind of an interesting thing. So I'm listening to it more in depth.
Whenever I used to throw a party, and the next morning everyone's hungover and it's time to like clean up all the cups and whatever, there's always two albums I would put on. The first one would be The Velvet Underground, with Nico.
Okay.
And, that starts off with Sunday Morning, and it usually is Sunday morning. It's a very slow song. It's like hypnotic. You're waking up. And like that whole album is kind of like, you're like groggy. And then I finish it with Ram, because I feel like, once again, like it's just a joyous album. It's time to like get moving.
Yeah, Ram's a quality. But my favorite McCartney album is oh Jesus, I totally forgot that. Oh, Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. I love that record. I think that is just a brilliant record.
I'm not that familiar with that one.
It's like 2004.
What's the name of it?
Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. Is it Backyard or Backyard? I always forget that. It's Backyard, I think. The cover is a picture of him in his back garden, probably in the late. Is it maybe late 50s, 60s? Anyways, it's him playing guitar, and someone's taking a picture of him through the window. And it's I think it's just a great record. Like, it's him playing everything. So he did it with Nigel Godrich, who's the producer of Radiohead. And he would tell him, which I'm sure a lot of producers aren't going to tell Paul McCartney if a song's shit, but he would say, that's shit. And I think, you know what I mean? So he was kind of forcing them to kind of do better. And it's some amazing songs on that record. Like there's some really nice, delicate stuff, and there's like glockenspiels, and there's a song called While You're Riding to Vanity Fair, and it's this amazing like string section and stuff. Class record. Highly recommend that one.
I'm definitely going to listen to it. I listened to, the last time we talked, you recommended a couple things to me. I listened to all of it.
Okay.
It was the one like, what's the way to describe it? The like post Beatles song.
Real Love and Freeze a Bird. Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that?
And then there was like, I liked it. Wouldn't say
Yeah.
I loved it, but I liked it.
What did you not like about it? The sound of it, maybe.
Honestly, I don't remember specifically why I didn't like, because when you told me about it, I was really excited. I was like, I gotta listen to this, and I listened to it. I was like, that's good, but I wasn't like, yeah,
I remember when the first time I heard that, I was like, oh shit, man, I love it. That's kind of one of the things that kind of got me into the Beatles, which is strange because it's the Treatles, really. It's just the three lads with fucking Lennon.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just something about it, and I think the video was very much a kind of, they did all these kind of pastiche kind of things that was quite cool, and I'm kind of curious. Oh yeah, sorry, you were going on about, there was other stuff I sent you. So the Beatles, or I said to you, what else was it?
There was Jesus Lizard.
What'd you think of that?
I dug that for sure. I like that.
Yeah,
definitely.
that was cool. That's some visceral shit, like.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know what else I said to you. Was it talk? Maybe talk. I don't know.
I think that was it. I think it was just the three things.
Yeah, so the Beatles. Well, you should definitely check out Talk, that album, Spirit of Eden. That is just incredible, man. That is
All right.
just. I've done many podcasts on that. Like, I had like the producer on it, the engineer on it, and I love that record. It's just kind of like some of those records that you hear and they're out of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They could be kind of any time you could put them out,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a cool thing about, especially when you do more organic acoustic music. I don't mean acoustic in a guitar, but I just mean acoustic, acoustic. it can be a bit more timeless. Whereas if you're using electronic stuff, which do love, but it can date stuff. You know, if you there's just certain things of when you hear them as electronic music, you go, oh, that's Aphex Twins, you know, that's 90s, or you know what I mean. There's certain
Mm-hmm.
whereas if you use more like acoustic pianos, guitars, whatever, you can kind of come out with something a bit, you know, more timeless. Sorry,
You know what album I find to be timeless, or not timeless. I forget what the phrase you just used. Out of time.
out of time.
Um,
Sorry, my cat is just
the
crying here for a second. Hold on. Come here. Come here. Come here.
cats on screen are always good.
Now
Aw,
you're famous. Look at her mustache.
that's great.
Sorry, what were you saying?
The album that I find that it's so hard to date. Violent Femmes self-titled. I don't know how familiar you are with that album.
No, I know that one famous song though. Is that on it? That one.
Blister in the Sun. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that song. Yeah, yeah.
That's usually the. Dude, you have to listen to this album. If you've never listened to this album, you have to.
No.
It's.
I haven't listened to it. Sorry.
I would say it's easily top 5 most played albums of mine.
Really?
I think it's perfect in every turn. Perfect everywhere you look. The attitude of it, the sound of it, the songwriting of it is fantastic. And
Yeah.
The leader of the band, Gordon Gano, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, but I'm almost certain he wrote all of those songs while he was in high school. So, you know, growing up listening to his songwriting, it was very easy to relate to. It was very easy to, you know, there's so much angst there. You know, it's talking about girls and stuff like that, you know, and dealing with stuff like that. But you need to listen to that if you've never listened to it.
Okay. Okay. What year was that? Was that the late 80s or 90s?
I believe it's either
Early 90s.
1984 or 1985 or 1983. I'm gonna say 1984. I'm just gonna make a guess there, but it's somewhere around there.
Okay.
But if you listen to it, you would think, I would say you would guess this is a late 90s band. That's what you would guess. I would say he's about 10 years ahead of his time sound-wise.
Yeah, because I always thought
It's-
they were
it's-
like, I always thought they were like 91, 92-ish. Like, because I know that song. That's what I always thought.
Yeah, I don't know if that band's success was delayed. Maybe that is why. But that song, I mean, that song is in countless movies, TV shows, commercials, you know?
Yeah.
So that everyone knows that song.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it's such a shame that people don't know the rest of that album because I mean that's like my least favorite song on the album. The other songs are fantastic.
Okay, I'm definitely going to check that out. What's the name of the record?
Violent Femmes. It's a self-titled.
Oh, it's self-titled. Okay. Okay. Right,
Yeah.
that's interesting. It's funny, like some bands that should have been huge and were never huge. I remember I did a podcast and with I don't know if you know the band Bush. Well, the guitarist in it was
Bush?
Bush. They were 90s
That
band.
sounds familiar.
They had a song called Swallowed. Like swallowed. Actually, Steve Albini
I don't-
produced their record Razor Blade Suitcase, which actually is a class record. But anyways, we were talking on an after podcast. He said I had sent him a song, and he said you sound like the guy from Big Country. And I was like, Big Country? I'd heard the name Big Country, but I never actually heard them, you know? And then I went to
Yeah.
listen to them. And I was like, wow, how was this band? How have I never heard this? And then I watched a documentary and the story about how they got all this like praise, but they never got big. And it's always weird, like some of these bands that you go, how the fuck were they not big? It's just crazy, like. It's just, I don't understand.
Me and my friend Alex that are on a few of my videos. I often
Oh, just give me a
I-
second.
I
Just give me a second. I just gotta
Yep.
close my door. Sorry, dude.
yeah.
Sorry, bro. It's my cat.
No, it's fine.
I don't want the other one coming in.
Yeah.
It'd be mayhem
funny.
then. Sorry, you were saying you and your friend Alex.
Yeah, me and my friend Alex, we just interviewed the band The Gories. I don't know if you've ever heard of the band The Gories.
No.
Very not well-known band, but a very strong cult following. And where was I going with this? Oh, like you were saying, like there's some bands that just never got their recognition, and this is one of those bands that's like their story is part of their success. You know, it's hard to explain. It's like their music is generally garage rock, but it's like a very stripped down garage rock. Like the drummer Peggy, she just uses two toms, you know, no bass drum, no snare, you know, so it's very, very primal.
Yeah.
But and like they're all like their aesthetic is like, you know, not practicing, you know, they're loose on stage, but it's like it's a lot of fun. But anyway, it's interesting to see a band like that and that played for years without any recognition. And, you know, they were just a local band in Detroit that people would go see, that's the Gories, and there'd be maybe a handful of people in the audience. And like, you know, I mean like the music community is all very familiar with those circumstances of playing in a bar somewhere and having 3 people in the audience, you know. So I just think it's so interesting.
Yeah, it's odd because, you know, some bands you're like convinced, you know, like, oh, they're gonna make it, they're gonna make it, and it just. I always say music is like, I think in music talent is probably the least thing that you need to make it, which sounds probably stupid, but I mean it's, you know, if you have connections and you have like connections are such a huge thing, man. It's like, you know, it's a massive thing. Like anything in life, it's like who you know, really, isn't it?
I think there are some cases where talent overshadows the persona of that person, but most of the time you're 100% right. And this goes for anything in life, not just musicians. I mean, like politicians is a great example. There's the human element where people need to connect to this person. Like Elvis is a perfect example. You know, when Elvis was on screen, people were like, whoa, this guy, he means something, you know? Same thing. Like music, it's all about that energy. I hate using the word energy. That persona that you carry, that swagger that you bring into a room that people go, who is this guy, man? This guy means something.
Yeah, that can carry a lot of weight, can't it?
Yeah, it's confidence. It's really confidence.
For sure. Have you got to the point, have you met any like labels or anything like that, people in the business side of things?
I'm actually, for the first time, it's funny you asked me that because I'm in the midst of writing a letter and sending a 1/4-inch reel copy of my album to a guy who runs a record label. I'm not going to be specific with the names because it's a long shot.
Yeah.
So I don't want to mention names, but the website for this record label hasn't been updated and it looks like 20 years. So I messaged the guy on Instagram who runs it, or used to own it, I don't even know. Yeah. And I said, hey, are you still have access to that P.O. box? I want to send you a letter. Yeah. And he responds back like, it's not a legal letter, I hope. And I'm like, no, nothing of the sorts. It's nothing of the sorts. So long story short, yes, today for the first time I talked to someone that's like into that sphere.
That's cool, man.
And the only reason I did it is because through this interview with the band The Gories that I'm talking about, which I'm working on this huge video for it.
Yeah.
We were talking a lot about local music scene, specifically Detroit music scene, because this band's from Detroit. They're playing around, and a lot of our questions and a lot of our answers were just talking about their time in Detroit and the other bands and the atmosphere and what it was like. And it made me start thinking of famous record labels and people involved that I know of near me in New Jersey. And I was like,
Right.
why don't I reach out to these people? Even if they say no, like they have no interest, it'd be still cool to have contact with them, maybe do an interview with them. Like I'm sure these people have so many stories that need to come out, and I would just love to meet these people. And even if it's not anywhere on my YouTube channel, just to send letters back and forth, whatever the case may be. And I think that's something that I need to like kind of put myself out there. It's just, I feel like a lot of the times I don't, because like, think about how little of fame that I have on YouTube, right? The amount of people that message me for their own benefit is a lot. It is a lot. And I can only imagine someone like that who has notoriety in, the music scene, how many people they must get annoying the hell out of them, being like, oh, put me on record, whatever the case may be. And like, I don't want to be that guy. So
But
I
that's
don't put
their
myself
job.
out there.
That's their job. If they're on the record label, you know what you're signing up for. So it's you know what I mean.
Yeah. And this record label in particular, like I said, their website hasn't been updated in 20 years. And I don't think they've signed. This record label mostly does reissues of albums that haven't been issued in years.
Okay, that's interesting.
So they're not. Like I said, I don't want to get into specifics because I'm shooting for the moon with this one. So why did I bring this up? Oh, so I brought this up because, I don't think people pitch music to this guy anymore because they haven't signed something in 20 plus years. I'm going on like a hopeful that he's just like, why the fuck not? Excuse my language.
I think that's a good logic to use though, because he's probably thinking, this guy's randomly messaged me and is interesting. You know what I mean? It's kind of an interesting thing. He's like about the website and everything. So I think that could work in your favor, dude.
I mean, that's why I wanted to send a letter. I didn't want to just message him because this guy's like semi-famous. He's not famous by any mean, but I'm sure he gets a lot of people messaging him. I'm sure of it.
Right.
And when someone sends a letter and I'm going to type it up on my little typewriter, it's going to be all professional. I'm going to have margins set. I want to show like, hey, like,
you took the time to do it. Yeah.
I took the time. I'm serious about this. I wouldn't be pitching it if I didn't think it's worthy of being pitched.
Yeah, I get you. Cause it's like that's a big thing in music that can be hard to handle is rejection, because you get rejected a lot. Like no matter if it's like you send it off to people that don't listen to it, you try and get a gig, you mightn't get a gig, or you like even have meetings. I remember I had a meeting. Oh Jesus, I had a good few meetings.
Sorry to interrupt,
the
but
time after my
stupid
first
question.
record.
Wouldn't you tell by your
before
accent
my
that you're
first
not
record came out?
From London?
And one was I
okay.
got brought over to
Okay.
London, and I didn't tell the
Gotcha.
guy. I didn't tell the guy I was from London because I had this weird thing in my head that if he knew I was from Ireland, he wouldn't want to. It's so stupid, like. But I was like, oh, you won't tell him what it was. So he never talked to me. So it was just email. So I'd sent him this one song called "Lights in the Sand" that was a really like poppy song, and he loved the song, and he was saying all these great things and what we're going to do and we're this and this and this, and I'm like, oh my god. And then like fast forward to like 2 weeks later, I send him more music, and it's kind of like, yeah. And then fast forward to a month later, I'm not interested. So I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, and like, I remember the day he said it, I was at my brother's in Galway, and I just started crying because I was like, oh my god, it meant so much to me. And I kind of thought, finally, this guy. And he was a manager for the Arctic Monkeys. Like, I don't give a fuck I don't care. Fuck it. I don't give a shit. So his name was Ian McAndrews. I don't know if he's still the manager for the Arctic Monkeys, but it was just one of those things where you kind of um you get your hopes up a lot, and that can be quite difficult when it kind of constantly happens. And I think within music, and I'm kind of circling around with it within music, you need to kind of be prepared for all that kind of stuff, and it can be just quite difficult because you like making music is a way of like you're bearing your soul or whatever it is. They mean a lot to you, and when people say stuff like flippant things like, "Oh, someone like you doesn't come around every 20 years," like you believe you might. It's not true, but you believe it for a second, and you go, "Wow," and then when it's like a month later, it means nothing for them to say, "Nah, whatever, on to the next one." So it can be that stuff when I was younger was difficult for me, and it can kind of tend to make you kind of not want to send things to people and go, "Oh, fuck it, what's the point?" Because I had so many of those meetings. It was like, with other big managers and stuff like that, and it can be difficult to take because then you're like, well, why am I doing this? And you can question things, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's yeah.
Definitely not an easy thing to swallow, rejection for anything. And
No.
I don't think like I am objective enough about the situation where I'm gonna be totally okay if I send this to people and they say no. I mean, especially with the internet. I mean, like, I technically already released my album, like whoever wants to listen to it can listen to it. So like, it's not the biggest deal. And like,
Yeah.
it's just, it would obviously, for the rest of my life, if a record label was like, yeah, we'll put out a few thousand copies, like that would make my life. I could die a happy man, whatever. But there's other ways for me to get there to be happy and die a happy man. It doesn't have to be that.
Yeah. I think years ago that when back then you kind of needed a label more then than you do now. So for me it was more of a bigger thing then than it is now. And I think the good thing about it is that it actually it's quite good because you can kind of go, people saying all these things, whether they mean it at the time or not mean it at the time, bigging you up or not bigging you up. You just kind of have to just kind of keep going and following your own kind of steam and, not get caught up in all that shit that people say to you about, because there's so much people that will say, I'm not talking about that guy, but just in general, that will tell you the world, and then 5 minutes later we're like, oh, not interested. And the music business is like that. It's full of like bullshitters, really, isn't it? So
I bet
it can be just...
I have little experience, so I'm not really speaking from experience, but I could assume so. I could definitely assume so.
I think it's more at the huge, like, massive corporation-y levels. I think more when you have people like who are passionate about music, like the guy that you're dealing with sounds like he's a guy who's passionate about music because he's putting out records of people that are more unknown. So you have to have a passion for that.
Yeah, this guy is very much involved with the local New Jersey scene. So like, he obviously does it for the love of it. It's his life. I mean, his whole life has been revolving around the music scene, in one way or another. So there definitely is a different. Like, this guy wouldn't sweetheart me. He wouldn't pull out the rug for me. He would just tell me up front. I'm assuming, obviously, but he would just tell me up front, no, man, it's great, I love it, but I'm not interested. There would be no reason for him to be like, well, maybe,
Yeah, I'd always rather that, like, that kind of people up front. That was a thing that I always suffered with on my first record, because I had this one song that was really, like, commercial. But then I had other songs on the record, that were not commercial, that were, like, classical music pieces. So I would always run into that problem. I would meet these people and they would hear because you're obviously going to send the song you think more people might listen to the most. And then so they are expecting 10 more of those. And what they get isn't 10 more of those, which you can understand. They're trying to sell stuff. But then it goes from like, we're interested to like, well, no, we don't want this weird fucking classical music. You know, which I can understand. I can understand, but you know, I think when you're trying to make a record, you know, it's I'm into records. Like I like making records. Like you know, you're probably the same. You like records, kind of like you come from someone who listens to records, and I'm
Yeah.
still in that world of records. I like singing, but I'm a record guy. You know, I think it should be like a body of work or something.
I I've recently had a new perspective on records versus not a playlist but a compilation. And what I mean by that is going back to this Gory's interview that I was just talking about that me and my friend Alex did. They were talking a lot of music, what their influences were, and they brought up a lot of comps, blues comps, garage rock comps, R&B compilations, and they would say like, you know, they obviously would listen to these compilations a lot, or also compilations of the same artist, like all the artists' singles, you know,
Okay.
compiled onto an LP. And I don't know why it gave me a whole new perspective on it, because I always just imagined back when people were listening to records, they were listening to albums. Like a full-length album and not a compilation of some sort. And there's no reason for me to think that. That's just how I listen to older music.
Yeah.
And a great example to relate this back to the Beatles, right? When I listen to the Beatles' first album, right, I'm listening to Please Please Me because that's the Beatles' first album. Well, in America, that wasn't the first album. Neither was With the Beatles. It was
Yeah.
Meet the Beatles, which was
Yeah.
a combination of the two albums. So, like, I just think that's interesting to think about that. You know, the way I listen to the Beatles is not even how someone in America at the time was listening to the Beatles. They're listening into a different sequence.
Yeah, and Magical Mystery Tour. That in the remember in America that was like an
Yeah.
album, and over here it was like an EP. But I always know it as an album, you know, because it's kind of become an album.
I thought it was the opposite. Was the EP was in England?
Yeah, and the album
Okay.
was in German. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong.
I'm not sure.
I could be wrong.
I know, like when they do the box sets now, they you know they do the LP version, so it fits in with all the other records.
Yeah, I think Magical Mystery Tour. That's one of my favorite Beatles records. I love that record, man. I think it's because it's got probably the most psychedelic shit on it. You know, you got
Yeah.
Penny Lane, you got Strawberry Fields and Flying and all that stuff, and yeah, I think that's just.
How do you feel about Pipers at the Gates of Dawn?
Pink Floyd record.
Yeah,
That's a
the first record.
That's a cool record. That's a cool record.
That you know, I used to listen to that a lot when I was in high school,
Yeah.
and it never really clicked with me. And a couple years ago, when I was like getting into music production and recording, I put that album on again with headphones, and I was like, "Holy crap! This album is such a trendsetter. It's so like Sid Barrett's songwriting is so like unconventional. Like there's no verses, there's no choruses, there's no riff. It's like it's all over the place, and it's like that's
Yeah.
such a unique album.
It's like a stream of kind of thought. The way he wrote it was just kind of like a stream kind of thing. You'd actually love
Yeah.
the Kings You probably know it, the Preservation Society. Do you know that record by the Kings?
Oh yes, yeah.
That's a brilliant record. Like that concept
Yes.
album. It's like
Yes,
so.
I'm-
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna say I've listened to that a bunch of times.
Yeah, that is just a brilliant record. Like Kinks are very like, you know, I know we're speaking of bands that should have been bigger, and I know they're big. I'm not going to that the Kings aren't a big band, but they're not big like Stones big. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
big, but not. And just some of their songs like Waterloo and Sunset, Days is a great song. They've so like Waterloo and Sunset is one of the fucking best songs. You know, like even.
You
I'm not going to say they invented garage rock, but I mean, you know, You Really Got Me and stuff like that. That's
Cool.
very fucking garagey.
That's like the It's almost like a precursor to the first garage rock revival. It feels like
Or
I
like
don't know how
that,
to explain
or
what
like
I'm
that
saying.
in the early 2000s, like with the vines and stuff like that. Do you remember that?
I,
That
I
was like,
I'm going that's what I would say was like the second revival. I'm going to
okay,
like the one in like the 80s, 90s area. I feel like those bands sound a lot like the Kinks.
yeah, 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 yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. I don't know if I could stand by that opinion, but
Do you actually? I know we're going on about rock, but do you think rock will ever have another revival? Because rock to me has kind of gone like jazz music now. It's still, I mean, probably not jazz because jazz doesn't sell out arenas. I mean, you can still sell out arenas in rock, but it's not the mainstream of music like it used to be. You know, you're not
well,
seeing in the charts if we're gonna be honest.
it's not necessarily that I think rock is not going to come back. I think that's the effect. Rock where it is today is the effect. The cause is I think people not playing instruments with one another. I think there's a lot less people in bands, there's a lot less people playing instruments with each other. It's at least in my life where I live and who I grew up with,
Yeah,
musicians were few and far between. There wasn't that many bands playing. There were a couple bands
really.
in my community. Like I'm talking about like
Whoa.
high school levels. You know, like there wasn't that.
So
There wasn't a lot of people, and
when was that for you? Like when were you? So when were you like?
um,
What age are you now?
I am 27, so like high school is like
Ah, okay.
2010s, early
Okay.
2010s.
Okay. Right. Because when I would have been in high school, like there was everyone was in a band. Like it was just before it was just around that like new metal stuff before that. So there was just bands
Yeah,
like it guitar music was just extremely popular and everyone was in bands and there was like a mad scene. Like we had like there was gigs every single week. It was brilliant, man. It was so good because like I always say there's the best gigs you have are probably you and three of your mates in a garage playing music. There's
yeah.
something about that you just can't replicate.
I've had the most fun at gigs at basement shows that just local bands put together that we played at, and those are always so much fun because it's just a mess. It's a you're playing in a concrete basement. Your ears are bleeding. There's underage drunk people running amok and doing dumb shit. You know, like those are always so much fun. But even when I was in my band and we were playing shows, it didn't really seem like there was a scene.
Right.
Now we weren't playing shows that much, so maybe we just didn't play enough shows. But it didn't feel like there was any cohesiveness there. I mean, it was so common for and still is where artists leave before the last band goes on. And
Okay.
I try not to do that because I find that extremely disrespectful. Even though I have done it before because I've had to go, but all of the artists playing that night should be supporting each other, should be hanging out, should be talking, and it doesn't really seem like that.
When we were young and playing like we're 15 and 16, we all hung out. Like all the bands we were kind of in the same school. So we would hang out like one of my friends' band were doing more like metal, so they'd be doing more like Sepultura and more heavy stuff like that and heavier Metallica stuff and we were doing more kind of like the grunge kind of things.
Hmm.
Maybe bits of Deftones and stuff like that. But we all hung out. We all like hung out with each other. It was like this cool scene, and there was kind of every type of band. There was like punk bands and metal bands and rock bands. Like, but it was all like rock. It was all centered around guitars, which was cool. It was like it was just
Yeah.
it was a class little scene, and
Well,
like that. But that's like literally that is now gone. Like there is no bands around where I live now. Like it's gone, which is sad. shh.
It is sad. It really is.
My cat's crying. I was just going shh. to
Yeah,
her.
I heard that and I was like, is someone opening up my door? It sounded like a door. Oh, I lost my train of thought. What was I gonna say? Oh, I was gonna say, I agree that like there's no local place to jam.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's a big part of the issues. There's used to be able to go places. I'm speaking before my time, but there'd just be people jamming and instruments musicians swapping, playing drums and stuff like that. You know, the best thing I had during my formative years as a drummer, for I think 3 years, I was going to this music lesson place, and it had an attached recording studio to it, and this was like I'd been playing drums years before that, but you know, I was trying to take it a little more seriously now. I was trying to like learn the right way. And on Fridays, they used to have jam nights. And anyone that went to the school could pay. Actually, you didn't even have to go there. You just bring $10, and the guy who owned the recording studio and the lesson company, he would coach us how to jam. And some of the kids there were I don't know, 10, you know, young kids. And I was maybe like 12, 13, I don't know. And he would pick a song every week. Like one week we did, let me think, like the Layla riff. We did like, it was just the riffs. Like we do simple stuff.
Yeah.
And we would just jam on the riff. And he taught all of us how to jam. And it was so much fun. And for a kid, I kept going back. I kept going back for a while. I was the only drummer. And then there was this girl that was much younger than me. And, you know, we had to swap. And I would get so annoyed. I'd be like, she's not as good as me. And like, you know, I was a kid. So I was being selfish. So I stopped going because I didn't want to share the time. Yeah, but I think stuff like that is great for kids. It's such a good experience.
Oh, for sure. Just give me 1 second. This cat of mine is going crazy. I need to get her and let her out. Darling, where are you? Come on. 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 Where are you? Come on. Come on. Good girl. Sorry about that. I'm sure you could hear in the background going. I was trying to like tell her go out the door, and she just kept crying at me, and then she runs out the door, and I'm like, oh god. So yeah,
that's great.
She's a sweet little cat. I love her. She actually sleeps in the bed with me every night, like every night. She's just like, and then she wakes me up in the middle of the night, like scraping the window to let her out, and then she wakes me up coming back, and I was like, brilliant. But oh yeah, we were talking about recording. You know, when I was a kid, I say 15, and we were playing first. I was really adamant. Even though we played covers, we played mostly actually our own songs. So I wrote all these songs where I was in a band called Midas, and I was adamant. Like we did our own stuff. I was like, I'm gonna write us songs, and we did our own stuff. And we recorded a demo with this guy named Ivan out the road in this it was kind of like a center place, but it was all recorded on like DAT tapes, and we had the drums in the middle of the room, like this huge roomy sound. But it was such a cool experience because we were like 15, and I remember we recorded 12 songs, and then we had I'd asked the principal of our school could we do a gig at lunch break, and I thought she'd say no because she was super strict and she's like a nun. Yeah. And she was like, to our amusement, she said yeah. And we're like, holy shit. And
wow,
like, so
dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, so all these kids were like in there, and we were like, we'd had all these demos that we did, and we were going to sell them and all like that stuff, and we sold loads of them. And like all these kids in the year, like 2 years below us, were like can we have your autograph? And we're like, yes. It was so cool because you like, and yeah, it was great though. It was great because, you know, that's a good thing about music is it can make you come out of your shell a bit. You know, if you're a bit shy, it can be good for that. And I always say it's harder to play in front of one person than it is in front of 100. Because with that, if you're playing with one person, you know that one person who's looking at you, and you're playing 100, you're like, you're kind of a bit more free. And but I'm going on a tangent. But yeah, that it was cool that there was so many bands back then, you know, like all of us, and it was just like a little scene. And our the guy in the band, Declan, who's one of my good friends still today, his father had like a minibus, so we'd go on the minibus and go to gigs, and the other band would come with us sometime. We just had the greatest crack ever, like. But we were talking like for the last year or so, and we keep saying we're gonna go do some Midas stuff again, you know, like just go back to the old school, and you know, I want to write some songs for that, and it'd be cool, just like, you know, something.
You just gotta show up at the school for a reunion show during one of the lunch breaks.
That would be just mental. It'd be like the cops would arrest us and shit like that. Like, who's those
That's
weird
punk rock, man.
Yeah.
That's punk rock.
Just turn up with our guitars and they're like, fuck off. Yeah. No, I'd like to just kind of just do some stuff like that, because like just mindless rock music, you know, because some of the stuff I do is a bit you know, with orchestras and pianos, and it can just be a bit heavy at times, and just to do something just super loose. And I think that's just cool when you're playing with a 3-piece. It's just, you know, it's not as, you know, produced, and it needs to be this and needs to be that. We need a string quartet, and we need this and we need that, and you know, that you can get too much into that.
I think that's the beauty of the band, the Gories, that I just interviewed. It's exactly what you're talking about. 3 people, the barest of bones of what you're using, and just having fun with it. You're just having fun, just making primal, feral, just goddamn like rock and roll, loud noises, and you know.
Yeah.
It is fun. It definitely is fun.
But like that's the funny thing too, because it was like when I was young, when we were in that band and we were doing more like kind of just rock, grungy kind of stuff. That's probably why we kind of broke up, because I wanted to do more kind of, you know, add more like classical stuff and more, you know, I wanted to get more expansive and stuff like that. And when you're that young, people just want to rock out, and I'm like, you know, I'm like, nah, man, we should like get like strings in and do all this shit. You know, like at 17 and 16, no one wants to hear that. They're like, fuck off.
Yeah, that's so funny.
You know, whereas like hindsight's an amazing thing. So yeah, but that's just, you know, I grew up playing classical music, so that was always kind of in my thing. So I had stopped playing piano for so long, and then piano I find more comfortable to play on because I know it better than guitar. So I have more kind of options on it, if you know what I mean. Like like there's some guys who are just amazing on guitar, and I'm okay. Piano, I know my way around, and it's more, I don't know, I can kind of get more, there's more options for me, you know, I just know it more.
I think every musician should know piano.
Do you play
for sure?
piano, yeah?
I think it. I try to, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I play, like a few of my songs have piano on it and keyboards too.
Oh yeah.
But like usually for the keyboard stuff, I'm a little more simpler riffs, like especially like an organ. You don't want to go too crazy. But you know, I've been spending a lot of time on my baby grand piano.
You have
lately,
a baby grand piano.
It's my grandmother's piano.
You son of a bitch. You bastard.
It
You bastard.
it is honestly, it's
I'm so jealous.
it's extremely nice.
Wow.
You could even just playing a simple 1-3-5 chord on it Like if you've never played an instrument before and someone just said, "Hey, play these 3 notes and hit the bass note on your left hand," like it sounds good, it feels good, you feel the vibrations. It's such a luxury to have that. But obviously at the same time, it's taking up a huge portion of my living room, and it completely changed the layout of my house. So it's you know, in that aspect, it kind of sucks. But you know, I wouldn't part with it for the world. Obviously, one, it's my grandmother's piano, so I'm not gonna ever throw it out. But it's such a luxury. It's a great way to learn music theory, and you know, even if you just learn piano in the key of C, and that's all you do, just play riffs or chord progressions in the key of C, you will learn so much about the relationships between notes. You'll start to see, like, oh, the fifth of this chord is actually the fourth of this chord, and you know, you start seeing patterns.
Oh yeah, there's like pianos. There's because in a weird way you're playing. I kind of always likened it to you're playing guitar and bass at the same time, because you have to use your two hands, and you know, it's you can just. I think just for me, like I said, there's some people who are just incredible at guitar and can actually play it like they're playing a piano. You can do all that crazy shit.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I'm always trying to get better at guitar and get better at piano and stuff like that. But it can, sometimes you kind of have to focus on one, because there's so much, you know, hard stuff in piano that, you know, like I'm learning, let me see what I'm learning. I don't know. I've been learning Rhapsody in Blue at the moment. So like there's some crazy shit in that, you know. So it's either I learn some crazy piano stuff, or then I learn some crazy guitar stuff. And it's like, oh, jeez, you know, it's kind of like, and like even if you look back on, oh, what's the dude's name? I've totally gone I've blanked. Yeah, I don't know what I was saying there. But anyways, my mind just completely went blank there. I can't think of his name. Oh, that's terrible. Hold on a second. I'm trying to think of his name. Give me 5 seconds. I'm getting old.
I'm just gonna
I'm getting
some
fucking
exciting things on the camera.
Yeah. Well, you see, you can edit this out, which is great.
I'm not editing nothing out.
Okay, don't. What's that? I know his name.
I could speak while you're looking for it, because I have something relevant to say.
Irving Berlin. Irving Berlin. That's who it was.
Irving Berlin.
So Irving Berlin had he could only write in the key of F sharp. So he had a piano that was a transposing piano, and you would pull the lever on the piano and it would transpose the piano up a key, but he was still playing F sharp. So if it transposed it up a semitone, even though he'd be playing F sharp, it'd be G. But I'm thinking, this guy that wrote like White Christmas, Blue Skies, all these great songs, could only play an F sharp. I was like, crazy, like.
That is so interesting. I didn't know they had pianos like that.
Yeah, I didn't know either until I watched a documentary. I don't know what it was. It was like a video, and it's him talking on the piano, and it shows him pulling the lever, and you're like, whoa! And it's like, what the fuck?
It's a percussion piano. It's not like it's an electric piano.
It's a piano.
Wow!
But you're even like,
I didn't know that was the thing.
Yeah, even like Franz Liszt. So Franz Liszt, one of the piano companies at the time, back in Liszt time, I don't know, was it Steinway or Beckenstein? It was a piano company, and they built him like a little. It was like he would have a table there, like a desk, but they built him like a desk piano that was only like I think it was like an octave or two, so you could like get little ideas on it. And I'm thinking, that is so class. Even back then, you know, like for Liszt, who'd be playing these, like Liszt was an incredible piano player, but just so you could do little ideas, you know, like. I was like,
wow.
Whoa. Yeah, you know, back
cool.
in, yeah. So they had all those things that we probably wouldn't think they would have, like the piano that you could change semitones on, which is I never knew that existed until that Irving Berlin video. Crazy. You were about to say something. Sorry.
Yeah. Speaking of pianos, and we were talking before about. We touched upon a lot of things, but basically the music social atmosphere has changed a lot. Music seems so isolated to the individual these days, and think about how how common it was for people to have pianos, usually upright pianos, in their house. I mean, that used to be a family staple, and people would either, sing songs to their family. Sometimes it'd be religious, whatever the case may be. There was a
Yeah.
piano in the house, and as a kid, you're naturally going to play with the piano. And I know a lot of people, and I've never thought about this until this point, that are from the older generation that randomly know how to play like one particular song on the piano. And it's probably because they had a piano in their house growing up. Everyone had an upright piano. Well, not everyone, but it was a lot more common,
Yeah, it was definitely more common years ago than now. It was like, I know it's so many people, like you were saying, like yourself, that would have pianos in their house, and always someone would go bang out Fair Elise or something like that by Beethoven. Like there was always like you said, they always knew like one or two tunes, but even if you go back like further than that, the level of proficiency on piano was quite high. Like even people who wouldn't be like at the level of Mozart would still be quite high on piano, who would play like at an amateur level. It was still quite high, because I think it was just because it was so so little to do years ago. I mean, you kind of like look at all those master painters and stuff like that, like Michelangelo and stuff like that. They dedicated so much time to that because they didn't have those distractions that we have now. Like I do find, I don't know if you the same. When I record lately, I don't have my phone in the room. I don't have any shit in the room, because I know if I have my phone, I'll just like look at it and then I'll just pick it up and look at something, watch a video, and I'll end up watching some fucking video on Beethoven or some shit like that. And I'm like, jeez, I just fucking wasted an hour, dude.
Yeah, that's why distractions are a huge thing, and it's easy. That's why, like, I feel it's important to, when you go to work, whether that be you go in your recording studio or you go to your everyday day job, it helps when you're in a different environment versus, a lot of people now are working from home, and their workspace is the same space that they're living in. And your
Yeah.
brain is almost not conditioned to be like, put your phone away. You're here to work. No, you're home. You're home. You're looking at your phone. So, like, same concept. If you're in your recording studio, you need to treat it as, I'm here to do work. I can't look at my phone. I can't keep answering texts. So, it's not like I have a strict rule myself where, like, I turn off my phone, but I try to do that. I at least put it on mute, one for in case I'm tracking. But even if I'm mixing, I'll put my song on mute. This way, I'm just not getting random texts that, I could answer hours later that aren't, important at the time.
Yeah. I find I have to just not have it in the room, because I'll find some excuse to like look at something or not have my computer or something like that, and it's like, it's funny because even I know this isn't a distraction, but it's I don't know if it's even connected, but I had a MIDI like that's what my keyboard, like here I had a MIDI 88 key keyboard, but it had no speakers. So I would always I would have get ideas at nighttime, and I was like, I go, okay, I get up and I'll turn on my computer, and then I'll put the MIDI, and by the time I like even thought about doing that, I was like, I wouldn't even do it.
Yeah.
And so I decided to get a better keyboard lately, but it has speakers on it. And ever since I got the speakers, I would just like at nighttime, which I totally forgot about. I used to do this when I was younger. I would always come in not the middle of the night, but I would get a lot of ideas at nighttime, and I would actually go into my piano, and then I played or record something because it had speakers on it. And since I got this keyboard and it's got speakers on it, I'm constantly writing stuff now, because I actually can go to it and turn it on and instantly have sound, as opposed to, you know what I mean? And I think that's affected,
Yeah, definitely.
That's affected the way people record music, and even because to have to turn on a computer and to have to, it's a different way of doing things. You can sometimes lose an idea or lose.
I'll push back a little bit on that.
Go on.
because the
How
alternative,
dare you? How fucking
like let's just say you're recording the tape.
yeah.
I would argue there's more prep there, where you're gonna at least have to clean the heads with some alcohol at the bare minimum.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
You got to thread the tape. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't record on the computer, so maybe that's not something I think about where I'm waiting for the computer to boot up or whatever the case is. Or I don't know how long these, like, do music recording softwares take a long time to open? Does it take like a
Yeah,
minute
you
or two?
see,
Like,
if
what-
you first off, if you have a lot of plugins on it, it has to load all the fucking plugins first, and then when you
okay.
like, so if you use a sample library, some of the sample libraries are so big it takes a while to open
Yeah.
them, and you're just like,
You
by
know-
that stage, you're 20 minutes in, you're like, and there we go, and it's like, fuck's sake. So it's just like,
you know, I'm just thinking about it. When I was in the old band, the kid used to record us on his laptop, and I mean, his laptop was old, but it would take more than 30 minutes to get up and running. Sometimes it would take like an hour because he'd be having issues. So I guess you're right. I guess when there's computers involved, unless it's like a brand new computer, maybe with the state of the art processor in it, you know.
yeah, and mine is quite good. Even at that, it's quite good. But I just find the thing of getting up and then turning it on, just, I don't know. Maybe it's something mentally that I have, but I find just that it's like I can just pick up a guitar, pick up a ukulele, or go to my keyboard and stuff like that and play. It's just, and I can just record it, like scratch something on my phone and something like that, you know, like, so
Yeah.
I just have not hundreds, but I've like about 40 ideas kind of done. I kind of, you know, I don't know, do you write in a different way than you did at the start?
I have, let me get a prop here.
Okay.
I have this. It's just
Oh,
like a
nice. I was
portable
gonna get one. I was gonna
cassette.
get one. You know, I was gonna get one.
I bought that for $1 at
That's class.
what was it? It's a Goodwill store. I don't know what the equivalent would be in Ireland.
Yes,
Um,
charity shop we'd call them.
Yeah, it's a charity shop. So I bought that for $1, and this was before I ever thought about recording music. I just was like, yeah, hell yeah, $1, let's buy it. Well, anyway, you know, it's so simple, obviously, to record something on that. You just press record and it starts recording. So a majority of my songwriting will be, at least this is how I started. Recently, I haven't been doing this as much, but if I had a riff, right,
Yeah.
I would be like, man, this is a good riff. I'd get it. I have a looping pedal, so I would loop the riff on the pedal. I get a bass line going, and then I would hop on the drums, press record, and I'd get all 3 instruments, or if there's a keyboard, all 4 instruments playing.
Oh.
And I would basically mix the sound by putting it different distances away from each amp or my drum set. You know, if the drums were too loud, I'd back it up, you know. But anyway, I would do that because it would give me a roundabout idea of, okay, all this together, what does it sound like? And then I would try different riffs or different variations of the riff. I tried different instrumentations, and I'd basically just use that machine and just listen back. And like that little cassette player is so, like, the sound quality is so bad, but it's so good at the same time. It has this one has a built-in compressor that, I mean, almost all of those ones do have a
Yeah.
built-in compressor where it is so audible when it kicks in. It's limiting the signal by an extreme amount, and it sounds so great. I often like the versions of my riffs on that better than when I record it on my proper tape machine.
There's always something cool about like equipment that isn't amazing, but you can get a sound out of it, and you're like, that's just a fucking cool sound. You know, there's some coolness. When I started recording when I was younger, before computer recording, we used to use do you know mini discs? You know what mini discs are? We used
Yeah.
to use mini discs, and some of them used to have like microphone line things. So we'd get like a shitty microphone and just put it, put it in. But it would be distorting like
Yeah.
crazy. Like it'd be just
Yeah.
but it sounded class. Like there was just something about it. You're like, that just sounds hardcore. So
Yeah.
there's just something about the imperfection in some technologies are like, it's like things that people didn't like, tape wobble and stuff like that. And people now put that into songs. Like they put their piano and have this tape wobble, especially those,
Yeah.
those kind of, what would you call them? Lo-fi. There's a lot of those lo-fi things on Spotify, and they use. I know they use plugins. I know they use plugins, but you mean that was an effect that people want to get rid of years ago, and now it's as an effect. Kind of everything becomes an effect. Like everything that was like aliasing. Aliasing in plugins, or when you get like distortion, so you can get sometimes it's audible distortion, and people want to get aliasing out of plugins. So especially with harmonic stuff, so you have oversampling in plugins. But eventually, it's going to get to a point where kind of the aliasing will be a sound, like because some of the aliasing, when you have it on things, even though on a spectrum it looks like shit, and it's actually causing harmonic distortion and stuff like that, and digital harmonic distortion, which is obviously different than analog harmonic distortion, but it is creating a sound, and it's going to get to a point where people are going to like, oh man, I want that aliasing that you used to have in the 2022. Like everything becomes what was once not desired becomes desired in effect.
Yeah.
So there is that.
I remember when I first started recording, there's this guy up the block where I live, and he has like a home recording studio that I don't think he uses at all anymore, but he used to record people there.
Yeah.
And so I was looking for like kind of like a mentor when I started out, and I thought this guy might be it. He wound up not being a really mentor. He wanted me to pay him money. But anyway, I'm
good mentor, Mr. Miyagi there.
It was a little more complicated. He didn't want money. The reason I met this guy was because I used to mow his neighbor's lawn, and every now and then he would ask me like, hey, can you mow my lawn? Can you fix this? Whatever, can you rake these leaves? And I would always, when I'm mowing my lawn or doing yard work, I have these cans on that I listen to music on, and I used to always listen to music on. So he asked me about music one day, and we started talking about music. I'm getting too detailed with this story, but basically,
I hope he's listening to this.
I just want to say,
I just hope he's listening to this.
He didn't ask me for money. He asked me in exchange for some knowledge, I would do yard work for him. And it's not that wasn't a bad trade. It was just I was looking for someone to take me under their wing, and I was like,
I get you. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But anyway, we were talking about tape because the first thing I started recording on was a tape machine, and obviously he was like, oh, like that's interesting that you're using a tape machine. And we were talking about tape and recording on tape, and he's like, I mentioned that we were talking about lo-fi, and he was like, lo-fi. He was like, get that word out of here. He was just like, we were trying everything possible to make our recordings have a higher fidelity. When digital recording came out, this was a godsend for us. We no longer had to worry about EQing problems with tape. Whatever you put into the digital source, or whatever you put into the digital system, that's what you're going to get for the most part. Obviously, it's not perfect, but for the most part, that's what you're going to get. And I just thought it was so interesting that like he got offended that I said the word lo-fi. He was just like, get that garbage out of here.
Well, I suppose coming from that background of like that you're trying to get high fidelity, it's kind of not insulting, but you know what I mean. There is that kind of, but that happens within every generation. That's the funny thing though about people's aversion to digital. But what they don't get is like digital is perfect for classical music, because classical music they want the purest representation of it. So if you think about it, if you're putting there's some great recordings recorded through reel to reel stuff like that. But I mean, if you want the exact representation of a classical, like of an orchestra, you're not going to put through a tape machine because it's adding harmonics and distortion and compression and stuff like that. So the digital medium now, definitely, as opposed to, would say, the early 80s shit digital, it's actually perfect for classical music because you're kind of getting that representation of the sound, especially if it's recorded with like great microphones and great preamps and stuff like that. So, you know, there's always that kind of thing where people say, "Oh, digital sucks," and I think you can make great records digitally, and you can make great records analog. It just depends who's making the records. That's all.
100%.
You know, we can get too locked in that thing. That being said, I would love a tape machine.
I mean, dude, you got to get a tape machine. I say this all the time, so I know I'm repeating myself for subscribers of this channel who are still watching this are still watching this 2 hours in. The reason I love recording on tape has very little to do with the sound. It is way more to do with the process, and you know, we touched upon this a lot, me and you. It seems like it's all about the person who's got the guitar in the hand or the person behind the mixing board. It's that makes a song great. It has nothing to do with the medium. And I get annoyed when I see people ignorantly say like, "Oh, like that tape sound, man, like that tape sound's what you need." I don't subscribe by that. I think you could, because you know what? I have heard I don't know if I should get specific with this. I know someone who does a fantastic job of replicating the 70s tape sound on a digital system. Right. I mean, I was blown away. Like, usually I hear people say that, and I never believe it. I think it's very hard to replicate it. He is the closest I've ever heard anyone on any recording get to that sound. But to me, it's like, why? You got there, now what? That's the point. It's just like, okay, you did it, but where do you go from there? I don't think that's a big part of the end result at all.
Yeah. Like, yeah. It's but I think it's just like, it's like everything. People can be dogmatic about whatever side they're on. You know, if it's the same thing with like vinyl. Like, people say, "Oh, CD sucks," and vinyl's like, it's like, no, they're both good. Vinyl has a sound, and do some vinyl sound better than CDs? Yes. And do some CDs sound better than vinyl? Yes. It's like, yeah, you know, I just think you can. I mean, I'm guilty of that. I can get caught up in that too. You know, I can go, that sounds, you know. We all do, you know.
Yeah, I think it's funny. One time I saw, like, I think it was a YouTube comment, some guy complaining about records, and he was like, records. Whoever ripped the video to the internet, their copy of their album was really beat up, so it was dusty. It didn't sound great, but it was, I forget which album it was. It was a rare one, so it was like, just that it was on YouTube to listen to was awesome.
Yeah.
And some guy was complaining, like, records are so inferior, they're so stupid, you know, they wear out, they get scratched. He was like, CDs are superior. And I'm just thinking to myself, I have so many CDs in my car that don't play anymore because they have scratches on them. Yeah. So, like, CDs get scratched too. Like, what are you talking about, you know?
I have so many CDs that are scratched, and you're like, oh, dude. I did the whole toothpaste thing before, trying to get them out, and it just did not work.
Yeah, I've done that so many times.
Cleaning that fucking thing for ages afterwards with this crappy toothpaste.
I would argue... I would argue a scratched up record is better than a scratched up CD, because you literally can't listen to a scratched up CD.
Yeah, keep skipping.
A vinyl record, it might sound like crap, but as long as the needle stays in the groove and doesn't jump around or get stuck, I mean, you could still hear the song.
Yeah. I think what people like about vinyl is, maybe consciously or unconsciously, is that, you know, if you cannot, there's certain things you cannot do with vinyl. You cannot limit the shit out of it, obviously. So you're obviously going to get a more dynamic record, because you can't you just you can't brick wall a vinyl like you can do on a digital file. So essentially, you're always going to have a more dynamic record. So when people hear that, they go, "Oh, it sounds more open and it sounds more this." And it says, "Well, that's why." Yeah.
I think, just like I'm talking with the tape versus digital recording debate, way less to do with the sound, more to do with the process of it for me personally. And I think that's why people like records. I think the physical aspect of it, but you know what? I think I'm wrong, because the reason I say I'm wrong is I like to have like get-togethers at my house, like
Yeah.
little parties, and as the host, I'm like, hell yeah, let's listen to my records. Like I rarely, not rarely, but I don't listen to records as much as I should. And if people are over, let's put on some good records, have a little few too many beers, and have a good time. And every single time I throw one of these parties, someone's like, "Bro, you got the aux cable? Bro, can I put a song on?" And it's like, first of all, it's like, this is my damn party. I could host it how I want to goddamn host it. If we're gonna listen to this stupid novelty record, we're gonna listen to it, But that's why I say, like, I guess I'm wrong. People don't care that much about the social aspect of listening to a single record, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I find myself a lot in that camp. Like, for example, last weekend I had a couple buddies over,
Yeah.
and the one kid's going through a breakup, so we were drinking a little bit, not like heavy drinking, just having a couple beers, and we just needed something to put on the TV as background noise, and I have about 10 home recorded VHS tapes that I bought at like a garage sale one time, and we were just putting them on and watching them, and it was just like TV, like someone's was recording the television from the 80s.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting to watch, and like me and my other friends were really enjoying it. Like it was just something to talk about. It was something in the background. It was really interesting to see a different time. And my one friend was just like, "What the are we doing here? Like, put on Netflix. Like, we need to stream something. Like, why are we watching this? This is boring." So it's like sometimes I feel kind of isolated with my interests like that,
Yeah, yeah. I'd be the same though. I'd put on some sort of like VHS if I had it, and just because it's kind of cooler, because it creates an ambience. You know what I mean? Especially when like it's something like older movies. I do that a lot. Of like, I'll put on a movie, and I'll mute the movie, and I'll write music. I will kind of watch the movie.
That's a good idea.
Just kind of, I always do it ever since I was young. If I'm doing something, maybe I don't want to be alone. Oh my god! But I just there's something kind of cool of like watching something on mute. You kind of it's a different way to observe something, especially when you're doing something else. You're like you're playing guitar or playing the ukulele or something like that. You can see a scene or something like that, and it kind of can inform what you're doing. Or sometimes I'll watch a movie and I'll be writing lyrics, and someone will say a line and I might do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. I practice guitar a lot in front of the television, and one thing that I really enjoy about my grand piano is when I play my grand piano, I'm playing my grand piano. There's no TV there. I can't. I guess technically, there is a TV there, but I don't. I don't watch TV. I strictly sit there and I stare into space, and like sometimes when it's late at night, I'll get really sucked into playing the piano and writing songs like for
Right.
hours.
Right.
Like I mean, like for 6 hours at a time. Like I won't get up, and when it's at night, and I'll just put like one of my oil lamps on, just like really dim lighting, and all I have is my piano. It becomes almost like a meditation, even though it can get really frustrating sometimes, writing music and trying to learn parts. But it is a really cathartic experience just being with your instrument and nothing else. And, like I was saying, I watch TV and play guitar all the time, so it's not like
Yeah.
I'm saying you can't do that, but there is something nice about being alone.
Yeah. And that's the thing about even like, you have a grand piano. It's like even if you play like one note on those things, it's like, whoa. You can just like,
Yeah.
like even one chord, it's like, holy shit, man. The sound of a grand piano is just amazing.
It's very interesting. I recently had this piano moved to my house. I think my grandmother passed maybe 2 years ago, I would say. So, I got the piano about then.
Okay.
And since then, the reason I'm bringing it up is this piano has been physically moved. And it hasn't been tuned, and if I had to guess, at least 30 years. I would guess more. Guess more. But conservatively, hasn't been tuned in 30 years, I'd say. It's not in perfect tune. It's actually all slightly flat, as you could expect, it being not tuned. It's all slightly flat, but pretty much all about the same flatness, so you could play it.
Yeah.
There's a few notes. I think there's like 2 keys where you're like, that's a little off, but I cannot believe that it is still that much in tune. It blows my mind.
What is it? Is it like a semitone out?
No, less than that. It's
Wow, that's not bad at all.
it's only, I think, I'm not too good with this stuff. I think it's 20 cents off.
Wow, that's not bad. That's not bad at all.
Right, because that's not a lot, right? That's not bad.
No.
Yeah, it like on my phone, the needle, like if this is where's the camera? If this is like perfectly in tune, and like this is completely out of tune, it's only like right here, like it's barely out of tune.
So you can
I just think that's amazing.
You can easily pitch correct that without it being awfully sounding really.
Well,
is good.
I think I only have one song with that. Yeah, I think I only have the one song. It's Serial Skinner. I think that's the only song where that piano is recorded. And all I did was just detune the rest of my instruments slightly. It was such an easy fix. I could have, I could have messed around with the speed on my tape machine and recorded it. I guess I would record it a little slower and then speed up the tape. But it's so slightly off that I was like, it's definitely easier just to slightly detune my guitars.
That is the one handy thing about plugins is like there's a Waves plugin called Sound Shifter, and you can actually shift things in senses. So you can just go 10s, 5 cents, 1 cent. So it is in certain things like that. Digital is so handy to just go done, and you save it down, and it's done. Probably less fun, but So are you writing like a lot? You're writing sorry, go on.
No.
Are you writing like a lot of piano stuff now, or what are you doing?
Well, I think I keep forgetting who I'm having conversations with, but I'm pretty sure we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast that I have been writing like hundreds of riffs, and I can't stick on anything. So I have been writing a lot on piano, like a lot. But I haven't really been sticking with anything. And I think the reason I haven't been able to stick with anything is I know before I said it's because I'm second guessing it, and that's part of it. But I think the bigger part of it is I don't have a goal right now.
Right.
My first goal with that first album was I had the name Distorted Proportions, and really it was just that name that gave me some direction on what I wanted to do.
Okay, yeah.
Now, I think I have the next idea. The last time we spoke, we talked about, my next piece of work, I want it to be a concept album. And I've been cycling through different ideas, and I think that's why I can't stick with a riff, because I can't imagine a song. And recently, I think I picked an idea, and I think I'm going to roll with it. I don't know how grand piano is gonna fit in with that.
Yeah. Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who cares? Yeah. Shit? It's music. We can get lost up in I'm making this kind of music. Fucking music, man. Like it shouldn't matter. Like it's just do whatever you want. That's I had like fucking classical stuff. My first record, pop stuff, bits of jazz stuff, and who gives a shit? I mean, it mightn't. Some people don't like, some people like, and I do like that too. I sometimes like some some records actually are suited towards a kind of sound that's not too far from each other, if you know what I mean. Like you can have songs that are different but not like massively different, and some records like the White Album's like got tons of like different stuff on it.
Yeah.
That's a great record. Should have been a one album. I still will always say that should have been one album, but it's got some sort of, it's got some cool stuff. But with regards to concepts, I always find, especially when the record that I've been doing now, like once you get that one song for it, I think everything can kind of trickle off. Once you get that one song that is the kind of, might be the main song, but like it's a good kind of starting point of like, you go, oh, this is kind of where I'm going with the sound and the kind of vibe. Then everything kind of, you can kind of, it's like once you have the first chapter of a book done, you're kind of writing everything from that and you're kind of working off that.
Yeah.
And I think once you get that done, I think that's when you'll probably start to kind of flesh everything out and know where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
So that's...
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long have we been talking for now?
I think like 2 hours and 15
Jesus
minutes.
Christ, bro.
I guess we should wrap it up.
Okay.
I hope people like enjoy these conversations. We were kind of like we're all over the place today. I feel like the first one we did with you were asking me like interview type questions, so like it was a little structure. We're like all over the place here, but I don't know. I enjoy the conversation.
No,
so.
I think that's good though. I think people like what's natural. It's not like, and then, anyways, let me tell you. You know what I mean? It's like it's cool. And our problem is we probably could talk for too long, and then it'd probably turn into an 8-hour podcast, and everyone's like, can you stop talking, you fucking asswipes? So yeah.
Yeah, it'd be like I don't have a chance to talk about recording type stuff with people. I mean, like I respond to a lot of comments that are related to that, but like obviously a conversation, long form conversation is much different than that. So it's fun to do this, and I hope that you have your own podcast, which pitch yourself right now. Hold On to the Colors podcast. Go listen to it. Yeah. And you have had some really cool people on there.
Yeah, I've had some fucking... I'm always surprised when people say they'll come on. I'm like, really? It's like, okay, thanks.
Which podcast would be the first one to listen to if you were telling someone for the first time to watch one? Like, who would you recommend?
Jeez. God, there's so many of them now. I suppose the ones that I like, because I'm obviously a musician, but I like... the ones with Phil Brown, who's a Talk engineer, and Tim Freescreen, who also was the producer of Talk and wrote with Talk. Like he never gives interviews, so it was one of the only ones that I did where we didn't do it on camera because he didn't want to do it on camera. And
gotcha.
His wife,
so it's just audio.
Yeah, his wife messaged me afterwards and said that was a great interview, and I was like, oh, thanks very much. And so it was cool because I actually didn't really want to ask him anything about Talk because, doesn't really want to talk about them, not too much because people are annoying him and stuff like that. But when he brought it up, I just kind of went with it and asked him a few questions and stuff like that. And yeah, I like that. And like I said, Phil Brown, who's an engineer, like just those guys, like Phil recorded with Hendrix and Zeppelin and like all these like people from the 70s and just like incredible career, and his brother recorded all like Rush records and stuff like that. So it's like hearing those stories from those guys are just fucking great, man. They're just well, because they went through that time of being in studios. Like he was a tape op when he was like I think 16 or 17 or something like that, where you could go back and you could rock up to a studio back then and go, hey, can I get a job? And they'd be like, okay, here, you can make tea for us. Everyone started off as a tea boy, and then you just slowly got opportunities and so
everything now is paperwork and rules and what are you doing here? Even when like this is really I'm really going on a tangent here, but when I was a kid, before I was legal age of working, I tried to get a few jobs at places, just like BS jobs, like the kid who sweeps the store type of jobs. And everyone was like, no, we don't want to be involved. We do nothing. And it's like, people are so like, everything's rules. Everything has to be legal. Everything has to be on paper. It's like, oh my God, you know?
Yeah.
But like music, I think it really shows there.
Yeah, it really that was a kind of a sad thing to do. See, but I think it's because the studios have closed, and like, you know, there was so many studios back, especially in the 60s, like up to the point of home recording. Home recording changed everything. Like, it really did. I mean,
Yeah.
like it was, but like when I think of it, like, I couldn't do half the stuff I could do. It would have cost me a fucking fortune, like, to make records like I make now if I was to make, you know what I mean? So it's like everything that gives you something takes away something. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think we should end on that. That is poetic.
On that lovely note.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So if anyone interested, I have a classical piece coming out in like 2 weeks. Is it 2 weeks? Yeah. No, week. Tomorrow week. It's just it's like a companion piece to my album. My album's it's a concept album about dreams, but it's a classical.
Sweet. Oh no, did you freeze now? Okay. Oh my God. Of course, as you're pitching, it freezes.
No. Am I there?
Yeah, you're there.
All right. I was like,
all right, pitch the song again, and I'll edit it where it needs to be.
Hold on. Anyways, so yeah, for anyone that's interested, I have a new song out Friday week. Is it Friday? Yeah, tomorrow week. Called, geez, what's it called? I know what it's called. It's called, so what the fuck is the song called? I don't even know my own song. Oh yeah, it's called.
You have to say.
I'll do that again.
I ain't editing anything.
Okay, I'll do that again from the start, so you don't have to edit that shit part out. So, anyways, for anyone that's interested, I have a new piece coming out Friday week called "Sailing Through Clouds," which is a companion piece to my album, which is a concept album about dreams called Moons Over Mountains. So it's like a piece that connects to it. So it's just a little piano piece. It's nothing too crazy. And then I have a single coming out maybe in November, and my album's coming out in November, and then hopefully another album out in February. So that's where I'm at. I say
cool,
that,
man.
but it could be another 10 years. Yeah,
that's part of the fun.
Yeah. So what about you? When are you bringing out stuff? What's the any time date, or have you got nothing lined up?
I have a song that me and my friend Alex recorded that is done. We're waiting to shoot the photo for it. I think we're gonna release it as a single. It's like really like a one-off song.
Okay.
The concept album I'm working on right now is in the very initial stages, so I'm not sure where that's gonna go.
Okay.
I have really big ambitions for it. I'm like, maybe I'm saying too much right now, but screw it. I don't think it. If you've made it to this end of this podcast, I'll just say it. So I have this idea where it's a concept album. It's going to have a story of some story. It's not necessarily going to tell a story with the lyrics. It might, but more of kind of pictures of scenes in this story.
Okay.
And I want to accompany it with one, some sort of visual media, and two, I want to try to write a short story that goes along with this story. Now, I've never written anything in my life, so this is going to be a little bit of a milestone for me to write a short story. But I think it would be really interesting to try to release this all as one unit somehow. The visuals, the reading, and the the music itself.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would be packaged physically and metaphorically, but that's kind of where my brain is headed. I don't know. I can't really think of an equivalent besides like Magical Mystery Tour that's like close to that.
Okay. Cool. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah, that is my pitch for the video.
Nice. So if anyone has made it to the end of this podcast, you've heard Mario's pitch for his new record.
I'm almost saying it just so I have to do it because I think it's a good idea. I think it'll be unique. So like now that I say it and it's on the internet, it'll force me to try to come through with that promise.
There's no backing out. The only way that you can back out from this is you edit all that out. Right,
we
man.
will see.
Hey, we must do this again. I enjoy our chats. The good crap.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of people messaged me about the last podcast. They were like, "Man, I love that chat." Yeah, they loved it. They loved it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So hopefully people love this one. I'm excited. I hope that this could, I could keep doing these podcasts and just have people on that. I don't know. I don't necessarily like you get like top class people. I'm imagining something more like
me. Like non-top
just
class
like
people.
Someone like me. Not that you're not top class, but like I'm just some dumbass kid, So like, I almost feel like I'm not worthy to interview some of the people that you're interviewing.
Come on, man. Come on, you're good, man. You're an affable dude, hey. No.
Oh my god! I almost just dropped my whole computer.
No. I think I think you'd be good at it. I think you'd be good at it. Because you know what you're talking about, and people kind of. I think as long as you're kind of genuine, people can kind of feel that. You know what I mean? If you're not a bullshitter, like, and you're not. I always say to people, I'm not an interviewer when I'm doing podcasts. I'm not. I might ask people questions, but I'm not like those people who are these great interviewers. It's like if you just talk to somebody and you go off on tangents and stuff like that. I like that, especially when I'm listening to podcasts and people go off on mad fucking tangents. I like that. It's cool because it's like a conversation. Like when you're talking to somebody, you go on tangents. I mean, I definitely do, which is probably a bad thing. But it's.
You get better. You know when to rein yourself in and almost sometimes how to get an answer to a question without asking the question. Like I'm sure, like you were talking about, I forget who you were just talking about saying they didn't want to talk about the band.
Yeah. Tim Free Screen. Yeah. Tim.
Yes. So
I didn't want to bother him talking about talk.
You didn't want to bother him about this question, but there's ways to get people comfortable, the way to steer the conversation.
Yeah. I always think if people are kind of comfortable and they because I think a lot of probably interviewers and stuff like that, they're trying to get some sort of gossip shit, and screw that, man. I just want to talk to people who are interesting,
Yeah.
And there's so many, but there's loads. I think people who are famous can be interesting. People who are not famous can be interesting. I know loads of people who aren't famous who are like super interesting. Like I wish my piano teacher when I was a kid was alive, because he was in World War II. And like anytime I used to get bored of playing piano, I'd be like, "Hey, Mr. Woods, tell me about World War II." He'd be like, "Oh, anyway, so boy," and he took out the pictures and all this shit, So
that's awesome.
Yeah, he told me some mad stories, like just crazy stories that like.
Yeah,
and I'm like a kid. I'm like 7 years of age, and it's probably why today I still love like World War II stuff. I love World War II stuff, and it's just because of him. He had one of those big swords, like those kind of Aladdin swords. I forget the name of them, like a saber sword over his organ in his house. And he told me the story. They were on a beach, and this guy came running up to him, and he shot him. And he kept running. He shot him. And just as he's about to put the sword down, he just falls dead. And he took the sword.
God.
Yeah, he took the sword and he wrapped it up and he put it in one of the parts of the ship so they wouldn't know he had it. And then when they obviously landed back, he took it out and crazy.
Wow, man. Those people lived a completely different life. Well, we are so cushy and comfortable where we are.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's just, but. Just those stories are class, though. So many of those class stories, man. Just fucking brilliant. He was a dude. I miss that guy. Many. Gonna cry now. anyways, hey man. So it was good to chat to you. And
Yeah.
we should definitely do it again. I enjoy our conversations, even though they go mentally
For
long.
sure. That's fun. Honestly, like even if people don't listen to it, I enjoyed listening back to the one I did with on your channel and just
right.
listen to the conversation, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
I also realize how full of shit I am. I just say things on the fly sometimes.
Nah, man,
But,
you're good. You're good. Do you know what the worst thing is? When you do so many podcasts, you kind of go, "Oh my god, do I say?" You know, you have a tendency to repeat different stories because you're talking to someone for the first time, and then you're like, "Shit, I
Yeah.
said that again in that fucking podcast." Or
Yeah,
I might say,
yeah.
I might say like too much, or I might say a certain word too much. I'm like, "Oh, I shouldn't say that too much," you know. So, but no one gives a shit apart from me, you know. So it's like that. But yeah. Good chatting to you, man.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing this up, and I can go, why the fuck do I come across such an asshole?
No. I
right,
mean,
then.
kind of. Let's be honest.
Okay. Cheers, bro.
I
I mean, I wasn't gonna say it,
man.
but hey, I'll send you the audio on this tomorrow if that's cool. The video.
All right, man. Peace.
All right, brother. Take it easy, bro. Take care.
Peace.
Bye bye.
I told you that Kakashka's a Class A bum. A Class A bum.